Shalom, family. Come on in, y'all. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go.
Something soulful to make your soul full. Let's go. Kind of like this right here. Yeah. Got me feeling some type of way. I told y'all it was musicians that brought me into the truth. Got me up here dancing in the booth. They say the truth shall set you free, give you liberty, trick me. With your lies, you must be kidding me. The end is almost here. Of this captivity, it's time to repent. They say the truth shall set you free, give you liberty, trick me. With your lies, you must be kidding me. The end is almost here. Of this captivity, it's time to repent. Now watch this. The blessings and curses, the lesson of purpose. When we break God's laws, his aggression just worsens. The kingdom, the promise, the greatness, the honors. I want to live to see the day when Satan's demolished. Now, one time for my sister on the soul track, showbiz, AG. Can I get a soul clap? Old man is dead, and I don't want to go back. 12 tribes of Israel, this is bigger than just pro-black. Some speak of peace, and some prophesy doom. Moral of the story is prepare for the bridegroom. He may come at night, he may come in high noon. Everything destroyed like winds from a typhoon, always on time. I said your house never late. Apply the precepts to life so you can elevate. It won't be long before our people's in a better state. And when we get to heaven, damn right, we're gonna celebrate. And I ain't talking about a place that's invisible. Give us our kingdom on earth in the physical. Revelation 5 and 10, cause the spiritual church is a scam, so be careful who you listen to and don't be so easily led. Sheep need to be fed. What's understood never needs to be said. So I teach on a corner student in my black boots, always stay humble and keep my movements right. Say the truth shall set you free, give you liberty, trick me. With your lies, you must be kidding me. The end is almost here. Of this captivity, it's time to repent. They say the truth shall set you free, give you liberty, trick me. With your lies, you must be kidding me. The end is almost here. Of this captivity, it's time to repent. Now watch this. Laws and commandments discovered on fragments from the Dead Sea, hidden in caves. We're not physical slaves, a hero, a villain, our women, our children. The nation we're building, hopefully the Most High is willing now. One time for my sister on the soul track, Osh told me rhyme, so I did it on this throwback. Peace to my captain, my gun. I'm only rapping for fun, still working on the man I have to become. And that's a lifelong process, get right through project. And read about the states wearing white long garments in Revelation 7, then in Revelation 7. I want to take part in the first resurrection, and that's my analysis on straddle the fence. No hope for the wicked when the battle begins. Cause I tell you the truth, am I there for your enemy? If you know the words of the bridge, then just sing with me. Israel is on the rise. Laws and commandments, they saved our lives. Israel is on the rise. Laws and commandments, they saved our lives. Israel is on the rise. Laws and commandments, they saved our lives. Israel is on the rise. Laws and commandments, they saved our lives. Truth. It's time to attack Israel. That's the real message. Accompanied by the 6 minutes.
Hey, shalom, shalom, shalom. What is goody? What is goody? What's going on to the family? Peace and blessings to the family. I see y'all in the chat. I see you, brothers and sisters, in the chat. Shalom, sisters of the Maccabees. Shalom, Deacon Aisha Yah. Shalom to the motivator, live motivator. Shalom, Fish. Shalom, Channel 5. Shalom to everybody. Officer Madabar. Shalom to you, King, as well. Shalom to everybody watching on Facebook. Shalom to you as well. It's your brother, Priest Daniel, Alliance of Israel, Maccabees Alliance Council. Welcome to another edition. I see my homie Mika is in the building. I'm going to tell y'all, Mika, my homie Mika, let me tell you about Mika. Mika is like the sentinel. She like me. She is everywhere all at once, man. Wherever you at, Mika's there. I call her the female sentinel like me because I be everywhere sometimes. Y'all just don't see me. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah, shalom to everybody on Facebook. I see y'all checking in. Everybody, shalom, peace and blessings. The Most High strengthens you. Hey, you asked why is Devon in the hot seat? Because he is, because he can handle it. He can handle it. That's why. You heard what I'm saying? So without further ado, let's get right on into it, right? I'm going to go ahead and bring in the guest of honor. none other than I call him the prodigy, right? None other than my brother Divine Prospect of Kingdom Harbinger Ministries. Divine, it's been a long time coming. It's been a minute. Welcome back to Maccabees TV, King. You're muted, King. You're muted.
All right, there we go. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
All right, shalom, shalom, family. Shout out to Priest Danya Allah on Maccabees TV for hosting me on this evening. I appreciate that. It has been a long time coming since me and my brother Danya Allah had a build. We had a couple of them in the past. We had an old throwback one. We was at Joel Benjamin's bookstore, right, out in Brooklyn. That was what, back in 2016? We had that build.
Yeah.
Me a couple of times at events that we had bumped into each other at, you know what I'm saying? So I'm grateful to be here, man. All praise to the Most High Yah. Look forward to having this discussion with my brother Daniela. And let's get it popping, man.
Yes, sir. Yeah, sure. Let's get all the pleasantries out the way first. The people are asking. They're like, why is Divine on the hot seat? I told them because Divine can handle it. That's why.
Yeah, slightly.
You know why Divine is on the hot seat? Divine is not on the hot seat with me, per se. Divine is on the hot seat because there's a lot of people in the community that make snide, sideways remarks about the brother. You don't confront the brother. You don't go to the brother and ask questions, but you make snide, sideways, under your breath comments about the brother, make videos without talking to the brother, whatever. So he's going to answer all the things that you guys have been saying about him. We heard that some of y'all said he's an atheist and other things like that. We're going to talk about all that stuff. Divine heard you was atheist. We're not there yet. We're not there yet. Let's handle a little bit of business early, and we'll get back to it again a little bit later, right? So I've been seeing on your Facebook post that you have a organization called Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, and coming up later this month, you're actually opening up another chapter in Orlando, Florida. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a few moments for the people that may not be familiar with you, that may not be familiar with your work. I want you to talk about Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, what it is, and is this your first chapter that you're opening up outside of the main chapter? Like, give the people a little bit of background on your organization, if you could.
Yeah, just give me 1 second. I'm gonna bring up the flyer so people could check out the flyer real quick. So just give me 1 second. Let me see if this pops up. All right, let me try it again.
Mika, you always eating some popcorn. You always got the popcorn emojis, Mika. Let me find out. You're gonna gain a lot of weight doing that. You're eating a lot of popcorn. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Everybody hit the like, y'all. Hit the like button. Let's go. We're going to give y'all a good one. Devon is going to give y'all a good one today. Hit the thumbs up button, please. Go ahead, Devon.
All right, cool. So what do you see on my screen? Do you see the flyer?
I do. And you're going to see it right now, too. There you go.
All right, cool. All right. So I appreciate that. And again, you know, it's interesting because this organization that I had created, I created it back in the end of 2013, going into 2014. And initially, when I had launched it, I was just getting fully into, you know, the Israelite identity and, you know, understanding stuff about Israelites. And we're talking about back in 2013. I've been debating Israelites back in 2009, right, when I was a Christian. You know what I'm saying? And then there was a transition period in about 2012 going to 2013. And then from 2013 to 2014, that's when I decided to start getting into it heavy. But the reason why I started this organization is because I realized that we have to have a better way to be identified as Kodesh or Kadash or set apart, right? So we say that a lot. And we think simply by just keeping the statute, laws, and commandments, that's enough. But if you're still tethered to the umbilical cord of sustenance to this society that is oppressing us, then are you really set apart? You feel what I'm saying? Like, so what we decided to do was like, we wanted to look at, reevaluate our Israelite culture to ensure that there's a distinction between what we do and what a person who's religious, what they do, right? And we decided that the most fundamental thing for any individual in any society is a culture that motivates them, that inspires them, that puts limits on things that they shouldn't do because it's harmful, that has handed down information through generation, And it's pretty much the external immune system to protect the individual from outside influences that seek to undermine and destroy the individual. So we decided to reevaluate Israelite culture. And what I've identified is that when we go back to the pre-exilic period, so we talk about any period before the Babylonian captivity, and re-examine our culture while it was in its prime, and the ones who are faithful to it, right? Because we know Israel kept going off and, we're trying to imitate the other nations, and that was the thing that they were told not to do. But if we go back and look at the actual culture during that time period, which has the statute, laws, and commandments infused into it, we decided to take that and reconstruct it and find a way to restore it in contemporary times while in captivity, so we could be proactive in the things that we're doing. And the purpose of being proactive is because you're not waiting for something to happen to react or respond. You are putting actions or measures in place to prevent anything that's adversarial from coming upon your community, your family, or even yourself. So we decided that if we are able to reconstruct the period of time in which our culture was in its prime and find a way to restore it in this current time, then we can find a way to glue the community back together and be more close knit. Because once we have a central foundation that we all can agree to, which stems from Torah and any of the other customs that we may have done, which is filling spots through the different things we do in culture. And some people may call it halakha or whatever you want to call it. But these things are things that help us to glue each other together, because we'll be able to own something, our own cultural identity and our application, that cultural identity that you can't find in a book somewhere from somebody who is not in our culture. And if we're able to do that, and these are fundamental things that we can agree on collectively as a community, then the last stage will be autonomy, becoming self-governance, becoming self-reliable. Collectively as a community, if everything goes to hell, could we rely on each other? The Most High starts judging the nations, and America be one of the nations. Until we up out of here, are we able to survive? Right? Are we able to call one another? If I need something, I can call you instead of calling the government. If I need something, I could call her instead of calling the government, or calling some kind of outside agency or organization that does not have our best interests in mind. So autonomy is a way that we can collectively work together so we can rely on each other. And I'm gonna say this: when I went to the Mashara Yasharala Unity event, when it was out here in Atlanta, we have an interview up, Priest Anyala, right? We got an interview up for that. And they came together as a council. They created a flag that represents Israel. And they were talking on not doctrinal matters per se, but how to structure the nation within a nation, or the community that we have within a nation. So one of the things that was a standout, that there was a brother, and Daniela, you probably know more details than I do, that has his own funeral home. You know what I'm saying? That was there, that was part of the council. So it's like, if we have people that have different skill sets, trades, organizations, not-for-profits, sells products, goods, and services in our community, then we need a network so we know who's who. So we go to them first for the things that we need, and we don't have to go outside of them to get it from an oppressive system that can at any time withdraw those benefits from us, withdraw those privileges from us. So with a self-governing mindset, because you cannot have a autonomous community without learning how to govern yourselves and have the necessary resources to sustain you no matter what occurs. So in order for us to be truly Kodesh, and again, the harbinger is a herald, it's one that goes before a king or an army to announce their arrival and make preparations for them to stay and to be received by the people that they are heralding towards. So how do we prep the people to receive Yah when he returns? How do we prep the people so Yah can receive us when he returns? We have to be autonomous. And that is something that we are working together. And there are camps that are doing the same thing. So when I went to the Unity conference for Mashara Yasharala, that's all I saw there. And I was like, yo, they understand that this is the end state. This is what we need to do before we get up out of here, to buy us some breathing room until Yah redeems us. So what KHM does is that we have those three fundamental things: culture, community, autonomy. Restoring culture to have a more close-knit community so we can become autonomous, and become autonomous makes us set apart, because when Yah starts to judge this nation, guess what? We ain't gonna go along with it. We'll be close-knit, rely on each other, sustaining each other, just like they did in Goshen when Yah was judging Mizraim, according to the literature, right? Our literature. It's going to be the same thing here. We don't have to worry about the judgments affecting us because we have each other. And if we don't have that mindset, then we're going to be destroyed. We're going to say, no, I got to hold on to Babylon, because in Babylon, I'm getting money. In Babylon, I'm doing this. In Babylon, I'm doing that. And I got to go to this business and this store. And then our mind is going to be all in disarray when the end times come. So you want to talk about real preparation for prophetical events that's occurring. Are you autonomous? How many things you can say that you can do for yourself? And if you can't, you can call a brother or sister in your community to get it done for you. This is why every other ethnic bloc has an advantage over us, because they teach these principles when the baby is in the womb, not postnatal, prenatal. They sing to the baby in the womb, the things of their culture. They do their chants, right? They speak to the womb. So when the child comes out, the child is groomed from the womb, so that when they become into adulthood, these are things that are fundamental and things that they don't break, because it becomes taboo if you go against the grain. This is why they're so successful. So we have to look at that template, and we have to restructure it, redesign it, and apply it in a contemporary sense where it affects us today, in a sense where it motivates us to do for one another. And this is why unity is important. Now, you can't unify with everybody, and it's not for everybody, because Israelites believe in 2/3. The 1/3 that is on that page is the ones that you invest in, because you know you're going to get the return on investment. Is that if I have a resource I can provide him, I'm going to get the same back in return. So what we're doing now, more so than we did in previous years, is expanding. And we're bringing this organization to multiple cities. Like I tell people, it's a ministry organization. Ministry is there to serve. Organization is a collective body of people that's coming together with the similar values and principles in order to change something, in order to enable something, in order to perform something. So I tell people, you can join KHM and you can be part of a camp if you want, a church, a congregation in Israel. It doesn't matter, because we're not here to teach you doctrine per se, right? There's fundamentals that we have as an organization. But if somebody just wants to put their hands to the plow and get the work done in their community, and they want to be part of this autonomous process, so that way they can have all the resources pulled into our community before going elsewhere, then this is what we're going to enable and empower you to do. So out in Orlando this week, we'll be out there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we're leaving Sunday morning. We have an event that's on Friday evening for private invite only. So you'd have to email us at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com, or call the number or text the number you see on the screen. We have about 5-6 slots left. If anybody else wants to get in, contact us. And if you're in Orlando or the surrounding areas, then you can come on out. We're going to let you know what KHM is about. You know what I'm saying? We're going to make sure that there's some icebreakers so you can get to know the people in that area. And then either that evening or maybe the following Saturday, we're going to have dinner, right? We're going to take care of everything. Right. So it's no cost to come out if you get selected. And we're going to make sure that the people who are RSVP'd, we're going to make sure that you have a good time, make sure that you eat, make sure we give you some nice, clean alkaline water and everything like that. And we're going to have a good time learning about the core fundamentals of what KHM is and how this can help to advance forward our Israelite community.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So you brothers and sisters, you see the information on the flyer. If you brothers and sisters have any questions, his contact information is on there, and his YouTube channel is the same as the name of his organization, which is Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, if you want to reach out directly to Divine. Now, before we go any further, family, I see y'all already asking questions in the chat. Y'all see the title Hot Seat? And y'all already asking questions. Hey, Divine, remember what we spoke about before you got on?
Yeah.
We're gonna add one, man. We're gonna add the whole Esau thing, man, because you know that's the hot topic in Israel. And I know you did like a 3-hour breakdown on Esau. Whenever we're gonna get to that. We're going to get to that. We're going to get to that. And if Divine wants to, once we get through the questions, we might take a few phone calls if he's up to it.
I could take calls off. Somebody want to join on the panel, man. It's all good.
And if somebody wants to join in on the panel, as long as you are respectful and you respect the guest, then when the time appropriate comes, I'll email you the link and you guys can join on the panel too as well. As a matter of fact, I'll probably just put it in the chat in a little while. But before we get to that, let's get to some of the reasons why you brothers and sisters are here today. So, Brother Divine,
Yes, sir.
I recently saw a video from a gentleman who shall remain nameless because he and I are not on good terms either. And the man did a long video informing the world that you say you're an Israelite, but you are really an atheist. Now, I don't know. Listen, I wanted to keep the brain cells I have, so I didn't bother to watch the video. But I'm not sure what the argument he's making is based on. I'm not sure if you've heard it before.
Yeah, no, I've heard it.
So what I want to know is, A, are you an atheist? And B, why do people make that assumption and make that claim about you online? Like, why do they say that?
Yeah. So I think the misunderstanding comes in how I approach our culture. I try to approach our culture holistically. So I take the scriptures as a foundation. And with that, I look at history, archaeology, and examine living cultures to try and reconstruct and restore what our pre-exilic culture really was, right? And when it was in its prime and we were in our sovereignty in the land. And when people, and this is not everybody, it's just the people who misunderstand my position. I think the issue is because I do textual criticism, because I try to reconstruct what the original text would have said, because we don't have any of the quote unquote autographs or the originals. And with that, I have to use different methodologies in order to do so. I think people feel a certain kind of way to think that I'm trotting down the scriptures or that I'm not handling it as if it's God's word or whatever kind of approach that they may take with that. And I think it's just because they don't understand what my research methodology is in order for me to come to a conclusion on something. So it's unfortunate when people make terms like that. I mean, when people say stuff, it doesn't bother me. It started not with that person, it really started with Vocab Malone. He's been saying this since 2016, I think, 2017. You know what I'm saying? And I still remember when you and Hashad cut him up, but that's another story. You cut him and G-Con up, but he was saying that, and the reason why he does that is because it's a sticker shock. You know, when Christians see it, and oh, this guy's an atheist, and then from there he tries to show the differences that I have with Orthodox Christianity, and this is why I always come out and say I'm not a Christian. So if a Christian does a video on me to say that I am not a Christian, I've already affirmed that. So they're wasting their time. And then when I debate these people in the so-called conscious community, and they may make a statement to say that I'm atheist. I mean, they don't really say that. I mean, it's really this one guy and maybe another person. But for the most part, when they say stuff like that, the objective is to divide me away from the rest of our Israelite brethren, purposely because they want to point out my approach on certain things, which is different or distinct from what other people teach in the community. You know what I'm saying? I've realized that there's been a lot of stagnant growth in our community, and there has not been a lot of innovation because of the dogma that a lot of us hold in trying to do diligent research. And I'm not saying that nobody does it. Of course, I could point a lot of people. Matter of fact, I'm talking to Priest Anyala, and he's one of the people that I know that do that. But it's not common. Like, people are dependent upon a lot of the dogma that they were taught, and they presuppose that that's true without investigating it to ensure that they can validate it. And I tell people all the time, the best way to know if somebody knows something is not to ask them how, what, where, who, but ask them why, right? Because the understanding is going to show us if you have a mechanical, and I use mechanical very particularly, a mechanical understanding of the information that you are receiving or that you have received, that you have retained, and that you're reciting. And then once you're able to show us mechanically and interpret every component and let us know how each cog wheel works together to make the clock tick, then we want to know, how do you rightly apply that to get the yielded results, right? How do you yield the results that you intend when you take the knowledge that you understand and apply it? And when you're able to do that in a form where it's repeatable, that's what I tell people. Our culture is, you can use the scientific method to understand it. There's things that you can do that you put it through the same processes that you use through the scientific method, and you can create something that's repeatable. And over time, if we miss something here or there, or something new comes to light, it actually has gaps that you can fuse into it And then we can still use the same algorithm in order for us to output the final results. And the final results is what our anchored foundation is as Israelites. So I think the issue is when people don't understand my research methodology, simply because I want to make sure that when we're under scrutiny, that we fully understand what our position is, what our weaknesses are, our strengths are, and the opponent who's asking the questions, we understand their line of reasoning and why they're coming at us from that angle. But in order to do that, you have to fully vet the information that you're conveying to the public.
Right. So now, Divine, here's the issue that the Israelite community has with you. Here's another issue that the Israelite community has with you. And this is something I see online all the time. You've addressed it several times, but you're going to have to address it again and again and again and again. You are teaching polytheism. You know, you hear that. You teach polytheism. You believe in multiple gods, etc., etc. You don't acknowledge the one God of Israel, that you believe in many gods, which I know you've broken that down and explained yourself, but that is something that's a stigma that's been with you for a while. So for those that are not familiar with your teachings, or for those that may have heard that about you and have never heard you actually address it, take a moment to address the claim that you're pushing polytheism in the Israelite community.
Fact. So just for a point of reference, since I have to make this pretty concise and keep it compact, you can go to Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, which is my YouTube channel. And Prizanya Allah, somebody can add one of the minds can add it to the chat, the link to the chat. But you can go there and there's a playlist that I have on henotheism, and you can click on that and you can actually watch it for yourself. There's several videos that I've made on the subject matter, and I did a recent series that's called El Shaddai, Yod He Wav He, and El Elyon, three of a kind or one and the same, right? And in that lecture, I kind of break down what my position is on the divine council and explain what's going on with that. So simply to answer that, and I had a debate with Brother Zion Lex on this subject matter as well, is that the people who say that I'm a polytheist, they really don't understand what that term means. I cannot be a polytheist by reason of me only invoking Yod He Wav He. If I only invoke Yahweh, or some say is Yahuwah, some say is Yahuwah, Yah. If I'm only invoking that deity, then there's no way I could be a polytheist, because polytheists invoke multiple deities depending upon what they need the deity for. And they do that through a means of divination, right? And Israelites do divination as well when they pray. Prayer is a form of divination. Some people cast lots. That's a form of divination, right? But all of these things are instructions that are in Torah. These are things that have been done, things our ancestors have done, and there's ways that we can reconstruct it. But in polytheism, any deity can get worship, and almost every deity gets worship from an individual. They all are on the same playing field, right? That means all these other deities, they exist. No one is greater than the other. They all can be worshipped the same. And some people invoke them depending upon certain aspects of their life, certain things going on in the environment, et cetera, et cetera. Now, henotheism, which is what I subscribe to, is that there's one chief deity that is the creator deity. And the Israelite has a conditional form of henotheism, which means that Yod He Wav He, some say is Yahweh, some say Yahuwah, I say Yah or Yahu. That deity there, his throne cannot be vied for. He also goes by the name of El Shaddai. His throne cannot be vied for. He cannot be usurped. No other power can ever reign in his stead. So that's conditional henotheism, which means he's always in control. But there are also other powers that are subject to him that deal with other cultures, other trades, other features in the environment that have to come and give an account to him on what's going on and how they're operating, right? And so going into the text and looking at the linguistic features of the text, you see different things that allow you to actually see it in a different light when you're able to parse it out and look into the grammar and do your lexical studies and look at sister cultures. Then you can reconstruct really what the text is saying. And that's how I came to the conclusion of henotheism. Now, if I was a strict monotheist, then I will only believe that Yah is the only power and no other power exists but him. But if any other deity has been given a degree of power, and that power gives them influence over a group of people, a nation, a trade, or whatever, then that means that those individuals, entities can be worshipped by other cultures, right? And that's what we see in the scriptures with even Israelites making an attempt to do that. Some people say, well, all these deities, you know, the scripture says that they're all dumb idols, they're all idols, and they're not real things that have power. But if that's the case, then Hashatan, what is he? He has authority. Shaul, or Paul, calls him the God of this world because he has some form of power and authority. And, you know, you hear people talk about, you know, the Illuminati and all these other secret societies. Well, they worship other powers, and these powers give them a limited form of authority in order to do the things that they're doing. So the difference is, in regards to conditional henotheism and Israelite culture, is that even though these deities are out there with limited power, functionality, and authority, they all have to answer to the supreme authority, and that is the one that can never be vied for as far as his throne, and that's the creative power over all the other powers. Now, monotheists, which, you know, strict monotheists, a conservative monotheist, don't believe that no other power exists. So that means that any other thing that's going on is directly the Most High that's doing it, and not Shaitan or not any other deity. It's him that's doing everything. And that's what a strict or a conservative monotheist would say. Now, being that I'm a henotheist, it would make me a moderate, because I would say, yes, there is one creative power that is over all the other powers. There are councils, and we have imagery of councils in the scriptures where the Most High is residing over the council, and there's other powers that are there. And we see the powers given an account. We see instances where a lying spirit has to go and deceive prophets to give a false prophecy, and he opens up the conversation to other hosts that are there in his presence, and somebody comes and volunteers to do something. We see that in 1 Kings chapter 22. We see evidence of that. In the Psalms, we see evidence of David and other psalmists saying that he's high above all other powers. What other powers in the heavens can compare unto him? We see these things, these imagery that's there in regards to this. We see in Judges chapter 11, where Jephthah is talking to the king of Ammon, and he says to him, listen, whatever land your God has given you is yours, but our God has given us the lands that's around you, because they had an issue. And if you go back and read Judges chapter 11, you'll see where this is the case. Like, oh, what you mean your God? How does one God give land and authority to a group of people unless he's delegated that and allowed that from the chief power that's on high? And we see this also in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verse 8, where the nations have been divided. And the scripture says the sons of Israel, according to the numbers of the son of Israel. But then when you do textual criticism, you'll see that that is just from the Masoretic text. But if you look in the Septuagint, and you also look into the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Septuagint gives you the Enhelion, which means angels, or plural, Elohim. And then when you go into the Dead Sea Scrolls, you have the sons of El. So when you do, look at all three and you do a comparative analysis and you deduce to see what's the common denominator, you see each one of them has El. So in textual criticism, we look at what they have that's similar and saying all the features that or components that they share is the original. And over time, depending upon the scribe, the location, the time period, the doctrine that's influenced them, you may see slight variations on things. So it should say according to sons of El. If you go back into the Ugaritic text, you see that there were 70 sons of El. If you go back to the sons of Jacob or Yaakov, you see that he had 70 people that was with him that came into Mizraim. So if we're looking at it from its deductive component perspective, you see that that term El, sons of El, is relating back to something that was in the social memory of the Israelites, that they knew that there were 70 chief deities that was under the main deity that was divided, in which the nations had worshipped and dealt with. And again, when we look in Judges chapter 11, we see one of those entities there. Another two of those that was known in the region of Canaan was Baal and Asherah, right? And we see the Israelites going after them, worshiping after them, etc. So simply put, henotheism, from what I subscribe to, is that you have one chief deity that is the created deity whose throne cannot be vied for. And then you have others, deities underneath him that serve him, that have other functions that they commit in the environment. But monolatrism, you can look that up, which means that even though there are these lesser deities that serve and that are under and have to give account to this chief deity, people can pick those other deities out to worship because some people don't know about the chief deity. But what monolatrism teaches is that you singled out that one deity that has the chief power, and you worship him. And that's why I say with Israelites, it's conditional henotheism, because in other cultures like Greco-Roman cultures, you have, and even Babylonian culture, you have deities that can vie for that chief spot. In Canaanite culture, you have deities that attempt to vie for that chief spot as well. And in the Ugaritic tablets, we see that Baal wanted to vie for a throne to become Al Elyon, or the Most High. And that was a title to any deity that sat on that chief throne that El allowed them to rule in, according to the Ugaritic text. So hopefully that helps to give people some more backdrop, but you can go back to my channel, look at the playlist on henotheism, and you can see it in more detail.
All right. Somebody asked in the chat, am I going to be taking calls? Yeah, I'm going to get through some questions with Divine. And then what I'll do is I'll allow you guys to call in and ask your questions. I had a few, but you know what? We want to make this more friendly to the public. So I probably won't ask them everything that I told him I was going to ask him. I'll bring you guys into the conversation shortly because I'm not sure how much time he has. So let's move on to another one. And I'm kind of winging it now because I saw something in the chat.
That's
now, I want to ask you a question that's going to lead to another question. So the question is, Devon, I've never asked you this. Do you subscribe to the Apocrypha?
So the Apocrypha, I don't see the Apocrypha as equal to the regular canon of Scripture. I see it as complementary to it, which means that there's some information and wisdom in there that we can utilize, but it's not prescribed as canon, right? Meaning that compiled, going through the research, we see that what we have in the text today is believed to be the Orthodox, right? And that the Apocrypha was something that was crafted up during the intertestamental period. And that is complementary to the canon of Scripture that was laid out. So I use it to look for wisdom and some good information in it, but I don't see it on the same level as, let's say, the Chumash, or the first 5 books of the Torah.
What about the fact that when you read books like Esdras, which is Ezra, that there are prophecies in there? Do you subscribe to those prophecies being real or true, or?
Yes. One of the prophecies that I actually use in a lecture was where it says that Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob.
That was my next question. So you're going right where I wanted to go. Excellent.
Yeah. So
with that being said, let me ask you the question, because then you can roll it all into one answer. That's exactly where I was going, because the Esau thing is popping up, and we know that you did a lecture concerning Esau, who the Edomites are, right? And so you know where I stand on that already, obviously, right? And I know that you don't agree that you don't believe Esau is the white man.
No. Well, I'm gonna say I agree conditionally, because I don't see Esau just in one group of people.
So is Esau ruling the world right now? And if so, who is Esau today that's ruling the world? Who is this Esau that's the end of the world? Who is it right now? Who would you say?
Correct. So I would say that the concentration of who we call Esau, or the Edomites, is infused in what we call pseudo-Jews today, right? The so-called Jews that are ruling everything. I know some Israelite contemporaries would say that's Amalek, and some would agree that, the Edomites are infused in them, but the Edomites also infused with the Romans during the Roman Empire period. So we have some that were there, some that migrated and infused into what we call the pseudo-Jews today, and then there's some that was left back in Saudi Arabia that was still present there. And we know that looking at archaeology. So one feature of archaeology is looking what's called a stratum. A stratum is the different layers in which they find certain items, right? Archaeological items. So the belief based on what's called positioning is that the items that's found much lower are from an earlier strata, especially if they can take it and synchronize it with another region. Like, for example, I'll give you an example. So let's say that Thutmose III is the ruling Nusut, or king or pharaoh in Egypt. And one way that you can identify is through signet rings, seals, etc. And these are things that dignitaries always had. And if we see that ring and it's found in a certain layer in Kemet or Egypt or Misraim, and then we go and find that same ring, because when he goes somewhere, he uses that ring to seal certain things, and we find that same ring in a layer of strata, and let's say Israel, then we know we can synchronize those two levels of strata. And
they did that with Jericho when they dated Jericho.
Yes,
Yeah,
correct.
but go ahead. Sorry.
Now, also, you have something called superposition, which means sometimes that is not always an exact science, because sometimes due to erosion from water or due to earthquake and other means, you can shift that layer, right? Those layers where they don't align. So then that's why you got to look for certain things that are synchronous. Like I'll give you another example. If you see iron working, right, and one layer that seems to be slightly higher and this layer is slightly lower, and we know there's a fault right here, that explains why there's a shift there. But looking at the material that's in those two layers, we can synchronize it, right? So in my stance in regards to Esau, when we look in the regions that archaeology says the Edomites had dwelt in, we see that there's a continuous layers of occupation with what's called ethnic markers, whether that's pottery, whether that's tools for tool working and doing everyday items, whether that's burial customs, etc. But then we also see it dissipate after a certain period of time, which means that there was a migration. And I'll give you a quick example. Before the Edomites took over Seir, the Horites were there. And we have layers of that culture being in that region. And then over time, we know that the Edomites settled there after they took over the Horites. And then they started to occupy that region, and they started to leave ethnic markers that are distinct for that group. So we see occupation in what we call Northwest Arabia and the Transjordan region that matches who we call the Edomites, even after the Israelites were expelled out the land, because the Edomites were still there. And then we see later on their continuous occupation in different regions during the intertestamental period. And an example of that is when John Maccabees had the revolt, the Maccabean revolt. We know that some of the Edomites were recruited to assist the Yahudim during that time. And they then came in and occupied the regions that we would see Herod come out of, and other people will come out of. So the Edomites as a group, their objective is to conspire against the children of Israel, which they did before they went into Babylonian captivity, when they were being sieged by the Babylonians, and the Most High brought the prophets to prophesy against them. So this is something that they're continuously doing. So we see this function in some regions of people we would call, quote unquote, white people. We see some of them still in the region of Saudi Arabia, but we also see a migration that a lot of people don't talk about that went north towards where the Khazarian Empire was at and influenced individuals there that then migrated to East Europe, what we would call Germany, and then they started to, plant themselves there. So we see these features in various areas. And again, there are certain ethnic markers that follow these peoples that help us to trace to see where they are and who they could be today.
Right. So in keeping with the conversation, you and I spoke before the show that we were going to get a little bit into prophecy, right? And so let me just roll this question in, because my brother Jeremiah Judah keeps asking the same question, which I already know the answer. But Brother Divine, do you subscribe to the New Testament?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
I don't know. He wanted to ask me also, is hell a state of mind? I told him before that hell is a physical place that you can go to, and hell is also a state, right? And again, this is in looking into that word hell, going back to Hades and seeing where that word Hades existed at before its usage in the New Testament. So you can understand that the ancient Israelites did not believe in some ethereal place where you will go and get tortured by demons. When you look at Dante's Inferno and you look at other epics that actually detail that, this is where a lot of this understanding comes from. If you look at early Hellenistic writers, you'll see this is where some of that concept comes from. So when Yeshua in Luke chapter 16 is making a reference to something there, that's based on the Hellenized minds of the people that had already adopted certain things, that he had to use that example to teach them a principle. But if you go back to Matthew, he made it very clear when he says it's better that you pluck out your eye and you go into a realm of bliss with one eye than to go into hell with two eyes. The same thing with your arm. If your arm offends, he cut it off. And what he was doing was, when he was preaching the sermon, the valley of Hinnom, which was right there, that was used as a refuge site, was right there burning refuge continuously. And this is what the people would have been familiar with when he used that word Gehenna, because that word Gehenna is the Greek form of Hinnom. So it's, I mean, all you got to do is just look historically to see what happened in that region. It's a place of judgment as well. And to understand how that term evolved and found its way into the New Testament, its usage into what audience, and you'll be able to understand what's going on there. So I don't believe it's a temporary state where you're burning and pitchforks are getting poked into and stuff like that. Like I don't subscribe to that. But there's people in our community, and there's most Christians that do.
All right. So getting back to our conversation, now that we've established you believe in the New Testament, and now that we've established that you accept the prophecies of books like Ezra and the Apocrypha, we are agreed on a scripture that said that Esau is the end of the world and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. So according to the scriptures, and this is kind of a lengthy question, but you'll understand it. Are we in the end of the world? And if so, by extension, according to scripture, Esau would be ruling, and we see who the top kingdoms on the earth are.
Correct.
So are these kingdoms like Russia, like America, et cetera, do you see these kingdoms as being the kingdoms of Esau that are going to fall and that we're going to rule after? Do you see it that way according to scripture?
So I see it that way, is that we know, according to the book of Ezekiel, that there's going to be a Gog, Magog, and in the book of Revelation, a Gog and Magog war, right? So Gog and Magog is influenced by who we will call the Edomites and their doctrine to actually persecute the children of Israel, because this is what they've been doing historically since the pre-exilic period. So I would say that the ruling nations have been influenced with this doctrine of persecution and world dominance and world control by who we would call the Edomites. Their influence amongst these what we call the pseudo-Jews, and their influence amongst those who are the remnant of Rome that are now in areas of Europe, that these are people who are in power right now and who know the history, right? And they're the ones that's commencing persecution against Israel, no matter where we're scattered, as well as vying to control the world so they can choke out any rule that the Most High has, right? So his influence, we can see, is on the nations, leading into an end war that will finally commence and dissipate him for good. So that's my position on that.
What is the mark of the beast?
Great question. From my position, I see the mark of the beast is not just one thing, because it's going to control various aspects of society. According to the text, it's linked to something that is economical, it's linked to something that is political, and it's linked to something that is spiritual, right? So there's some that purport that the mark of the beast is the RFID chip that everybody's going to be planted with. Some people say that the mark of the beast is Christianity. I would say the mark of the beast is anything that pulled you away as an Israelite from following and worshiping the Most High and keeping the statute, laws, and commandments. So anything that the suppressive system can wean you off of keeping the statute, laws, and commandments, and you give worship to it, you idolize it, you follow after it, that will be the mark of the beast, because it shows that you don't have the mark of the Spirit in you, and that because you don't have the mark of the Spirit in you, that there's another spirit that's going to come and lead you away from that, and that there is the mark of the beast. Because anything else outside of keeping the statute, laws, and commandments and our culture that Yah has already given us is something that's going to be ownership of the beasts that are taking over the world. And we see this prophecy in the book of Daniel. We also see it in Revelation, that these beasts are going to rise up and do these things in the end time. So anything that pulls you away economically, this is why I say autonomy is important. So that way we can have the economic resources amongst our community, and we don't have to go to this oppressive system and request for their assistance. We can create community currency. We can have our own means of credit. We can do our own thing as a collective body. But when we're tied to say, I'm getting money and this and that, now you have the mark of the beast. Because if you're just getting money, you are now linked and tethered to the system, and now they control you. So we have to find ways where economically, politically, and spiritually, everything is kept within our community, because if not, and we can tell by a person's actions who they're really following, who they're really worshiping, what they're really idolizing. Now you have the mark of the beast on you, and now the beast controls you. Now the Most High no longer has control of you, and you don't have the Ruach. So that's my position on the mark of the beast.
Family, I don't have enough lights in the building. We got our brother Divine in the building. The brother's taking all questions. I'm about to open up the chat. Excuse me, I'm about to open up the phone lines. I'm about to put the link in the chat for y'all to call in. Like we servicing y'all today, man. The brother took time. The brother has a family, a wife. He has a job and he took time to come on here. The least y'all could do is smash that like button. Let's get them likes up, family. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Now, March the 22nd. I hear that that's the end date for the Israelite community. That's what I heard. That's what the streets are saying. The streets are saying it's over for the Israelite community March the 22nd. Why? Because we have a super scholar in the community that's come out of nowhere and knows everything about everything. And he's writing a book called The Misconceptions, I'm paraphrasing it, The Misconceptions of the Black Hebrew Israelites. I want to say that term, Black Hebrew Israelites, is a CIA term. I got to say that. It's a CIA term. It's a term that they're using to smear and besmirch our community. So anytime I see Black people using it, I got to give them that side eye, like the emojis that I be seeing it on the phone. I got to give them a side eye. But with that being said, that's still my brother, still a Black man, like I said. I'm going to purchase the book. The book, right? So without actually knowing what's in the book, what do you think about the fact that he's taken time out of his schedule to write a whole book about misconceptions of the Black Hebrew Israelites? If you were to guess, and you can encompass your answer into everything I said, if you were to guess, what are these misconceptions that are going to be in the book? What do you think is going to actually be in the book?
That's a great question. I want to start out by saying that now that me and Garfield are on good terms, after we had a discussion, I'm gonna go and purchase his work. I'm gonna get several copies. I told him I'm gonna buy it in bulk, right, and get several copies. And like you had said in the interview with Sonetta, you know, he is a Black man that has taken time to produce material. If I'm going to read something that is adversarial to our community, I would love to get it from somebody that is in the Black community, you know what I'm saying, to see how they're taking information and how they're juxtaposing it against what we stand on and what we believe. So I'm going to get the book. I was about to pre-order, but I asked him, I said, hey, Garfield, can I see a table of contents? Can I see a preface? Can I see a page or something? Because, you know, we go to Amazon and there's a book on Amazon. They give you a preview, right? So you can start reading a couple things in it and kind of get an idea if you want to buy the book or not. So he told me, well, you got to pre-order it first. I'm like, Garfield, are you having me pre-order this because you're getting the funds to actually publish it? Like, you know, but I don't know why he said to do it like that. But, you know, he said, if you pre-order, you'll get it. So I told him that I would pre-order in faith because I have no clue what's going to be in it. But like I tell people, there's nothing that is going to be in there that is new information, right? And we say that because Garfield does not do primary research, right? And most Israelites, we don't do primary research because we're not archaeologists, right? We're not scholars and professors that's recognized in academia that's going actually doing field work and doing things of that nature. So a lot of times information that we get is secondary, but what we try to do with the information that we got or things that we have is try to give a different perspective or different angle on the data that currently exists. And if it's something that we don't agree with in the consensus, then we'll structure and explain our methodology that leads us as to why we don't agree with the consensus. So we have a method to our madness. In regards to Garfield and knowing him over the course of, I mean, I knew him since 2014. So we're talking about 6 years of watching his videos and, you know, listening to the lectures that he's done and things of that nature. I have an idea of the compilation of things he's going to add to the text. I mean, to his book. It's nothing new. It's stuff that's already been out there. Some things is the consensus. Some things that he shares is not the consensus, right? But it goes along with the points that he's trying to make. So he kind of like throws them in there. So I think he's going to address the King James situation. I believe he's going to address the prophecies in the scriptures that's not consistent with one another internally in the text and externally with other comparative data that says otherwise. And I gave one of the examples of that is the Nebuchadnezzar scroll, right, that we find amongst the Dead Sea Scrolls that gives a different version of what we see the prophecy in the book of Daniel. So he's going to pull out things of that nature. He's going to pull out some issues as far as textual criticism. He's going to bring out things that he says, oh, those of Israelites who, you know, who teach Lashon Kodesh, that's not real Hebrew. So he's going to bring that out in his book as well. He's going to talk about the influence of the Persians, the Greeks, on the text itself. He's going to talk about Al Yahudu and those tablets that teach against Israelites actually going in mass back to Jerusalem to rebuild and everything like that. He's going to talk about the Cyprus cylinder and says, well, it's not specific to the Israelites, and that was something that was written later on. He's going to talk about festivals that pre-exist the text and say that Israel developed their own from pre-existing festivals that occurred in Canaan. He's going to debunk the Exodus and say that the Exodus did not happen. And the consensus says that these were Canaanites who rose up and escaped to the Central Hill countryside. And after the collapse of the Bronze Age, they started to, build a resistance against their overlords and take over, right? So that's kind of what's called the peasant revolt model. So that's probably going to be in there. He's going to quote Israel Finkelstein. He's going to make references to Hebrew grammar that he feels that Israelites are doing a disservice to. And he's also going to reference things such as the influence of the Greeks, right? He's going to talk about the Titans in regards to the Greeks and their influence and how the 12 tribes of Israel is not original to the scriptures, but it comes from other cultures. He's going to go into other doctrines that Israelites believe that he does not subscribe to, such as Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob being fictional and not being real. And there's some contemporary archaeological data to verify their existence. He's going to go into that. And several other things, man. I mean, there's so much that I've seen him say over the years. I just want to see which ones he put in there and which ones he doesn't, because like I told him jokingly, but truth and jest, I said, Garfield, I have a file on everything that you've taught. Like everything you've taught, I have a rebuttal or refutation for it. You know what I'm saying? And when I say everything, not every single thing, because I haven't watched everything he's done, but the major things that he has put out. My thing is to drill down to him, what are your sources? So I just want to look at the source citations, the biographies, and the footnotes if he has any in his book. That's what I'm gonna go to first, and I'm gonna vet every author that he's sourcing information from, right? And then we're gonna go in and see. And remember, the consensus, the general consensus always changes, right? Because in an inexact science of humanities, which consists of anthropology, and over time, new discoveries are made with new excavations, and or there are new up and coming scholars that put forth dissertations because their objective is to be unique and innovative, that will give a new line of sight on things that we currently know, and then research will come behind that, and people will look into that, and the consensus will change over time. I'll give you an example of that. If you look in maybe about 100 years ago, they would say that the Hittites was only a fictional group that came from the scriptures.
That's right.
And there was no archaeological data to verify that they existed. And that was the consensus. The consensus was, hey, they never existed. And then over time, they did some things and they found out and said, oh, well, you know what? Yeah, they did exist. Hey, we see this the information right here and and this and that. And then when they excavated and they looked at the kingdom of Hattusa, and they found various archaeological finds. One of the things they found was the Battle of Kadesh. This is how they knew that Ramses II was lying about having victory over the Hittites. You never sign a treaty with an enemy that you've beat up and that you've overpowered. You never hand over your daughter or a child of yours to get married to somebody else of another nation if you've won. You don't do things like that. So they even saw that the information there helped to rebut some of the things that Ramses had his scribes right about how victorious he was in battle. He even said there was one time where it was just him and a horse and in a chariot, he shot arrows and killed hundreds. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And we know that was fanciful, right? So the point I'm trying to make is, even though the consensus stays as it is today, over time that can change based on up and coming people getting their doctorates or postdoctorates and writing dissertations, challenging the status quo, and or archaeological finds or new interpretations of data based on conferences that are done, that will be subject to change. So I'm not afraid of the consensus. In some cases, I agree with it. Some cases, I don't. And if I don't agree with it, I'll show you the methodology that leads me to why I don't agree to it. Because what I've learned in regards to Israelite culture, a lot of the data is disjunctive. And I want to show you something that I believe that he may use, and this is important.
While you pulling it up, can I show something real quick just to back up what you said?
Sure.
Yeah, I want to show the family something real quick, because Divine has made a very heavy point how archaeology and anthropology and the consensus changes over time based on new discoveries. So you writing a book talking about you debunking this and you're debunking that, and 5 years from now, your book, the information in there might be outdated. Let me show you real quick. Let me share my screen. Right. This came out about a week ago, right? And you may have seen this already, Devon, because I know you on top of everything, right? This is from the Jerusalem Post. This is a website called the Jerusalem Post, right? And the article says, was the Bible right? Inscription may confirm confirm ancient Israel's borders. And when you come down and you read the very first paragraph, this is what it says. It says a newly discovered Hebrew language inscription might confirm that the border of ancient Israel reached areas that some archaeologists were previously skeptical about, meaning that they had a consensus and then the consensus changed. And the Bible was right the whole time. That's why you got to be careful when you write these books talking about you debunking the Bible, because you don't know what they're going to unearth. But let him go right on ahead. I'm done. Go ahead, Devon.
Yeah, and like I said, to me, this is fun, right? Like I said, I have no hostility or animosity.
No,
You know what I'm saying? I commend him for doing this because it forces Israelites to step their game up. I've been telling our community since 2014 that we got to get in the realm of scholarship and academia to see what people use against our community. A lot of times, and a lot of reasons why Israelites leave the communities, because they're confronted with information that people will pull from somebody teaching something in the conscious community. I'll give you an example. When they was teaching in regards to the, what was that? I'm trying to remember. I think Bill Valentine had taught on it. And somebody else, I forgot the other guy's name, not Bami Hamid, it was somebody else that taught on it, that was speaking certain things about like the Karast and the Christ, and that Christ concept came from Egypt. Well, if you go back and look at the actual Mejunecha for Karast, which is K-R-S-T, you see that that has nothing to do with the Christ concept, but this is that people are teaching. You see people go to movies or documentaries like Zeitgeist, and they'll go see where they comparing Yeshua to Horus, but yet there's no primary evidence for any information. You know what I'm saying? Like, and they take this up in the conscious community, and because they've never researched and they've never probably seen anybody address it, they're like, oh damn, we've been duped, we've been deceived, and blah blah, and this and that, and then they get taken away, and then they'll say, oh, we don't have the originals for the Bible. Well, if you look at a lot of debates that's been done by Christians in regards to, let's just say, the New Testament, they'll say that the New Testament is about 95 to 98% exact, that we can say that we have at least 90% or above the original text, and they show you the methodology on how they do that, right? So when our community is not getting into these realms of scholarship that's already out there and owning it for ourselves, when they come or be confronted with this information that the conscious community is sharing, or even some Christians, right? Because I see now Christians are teaming up with conscious community folk just to get against us. You got more books from them in regards to our community, that things that they agree in simply because they don't like us. And I'm just like, yo, if we are just a gnat that's a small nuisance, then you shouldn't even be thinking about us. But it's because they are losing adherents in droves. They see that this is the problem. So let me show you something on my screen real quick. I'm gonna share this on my screen so you can see. This is the book right here. Let me know when you can see it, Daniela.
Yep, you got it. There it is.
This is the book right here. And it's from the Quantitative Methods in Humanities and Social Sciences, right? It's published by Springer, which is a good publishing company if you want to get some, academic stuff. Thomas E. Levy, Thomas Schneider, William H.C. Prock. And it's called Israel's Exodus and Transdisciplinary Perspective, Text, Archaeology, Culture, and Geoscience. Now, why am I showing you this? What I was saying about the general consensus, there's a lot of general consensus that is in contradiction to what we find in the scriptures. And the reason why we've discovered this, and when you read this book, right, let me see if I can scroll through it. And I recommend we all have this, because this is some stuff that Garfield may use, or some people, if they read it, they may use against us. But you got to remember, a lot of the authors of some of the papers in here are showing you, validation for Israelite culture and things that they can say, hey, this is true and this is not true. But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because they have never done an interdisciplinary conference. So interdisciplinary means you have somebody who's an archaeologist, somebody that's a textual criticist, somebody that deals in geoscience, somebody that deals in art, You never had all the historian, Egyptologists that came together in a conference to talk about the Exodus topic. Because what you have is you have disjunctive components of one scholar writing about this here, another scholar writing about that there, another scholar writing, and then what people do is they'll look at this and say, oh, because this author, and that author wrote about it, oh, this is disproven, but they've never had a conference on it. See, what Egyptologists do, and I know because I'm part of the American Research Center in Egypt, and they have a conference every year where the best of the best Egyptologists come together. And I have a video of one of the conferences on my YouTube channel, come together to discuss new findings, to discuss the status quo or the consensus and challenge it. They submit their abstracts. You go and you listen to their lectures, you meet, they mingle, they have dinner. This is the stuff that they do in certain disciplines. Well, when it comes to certain topics or subject matters in regards to the scriptures, this is not being done like that. If it is being done, it's being done mostly by biblical archaeologists or biblical scholars, but not people from other disciplines who are not Christians, that are actually coming together to discuss and challenge the status quo to see whether or not it upholds or whether or not it falls or collapses. And when this was done, this set a standard. Then guess what? This was done back in 2013, if I'm not mistaken, but they've never followed up with another conference. If they had more conferences like this each and every year, my outlook and my projection is that they will find that there's more and more data if we examine it objectively in the scripture that actually holds true under scrutiny. And there's several things that they brought out in here that you can see that can even, and I'll show you some of the contents here, right? You have Exodus and memory, the historicity of the Exodus, what Egyptology today can contribute to assessing a biblical account of the sojourn in Egypt. Manfred Bietig, if you don't know who he is, he's the guy that did the excavations at Avaris, which is the biblical Goshen, which then in the 19th dynasty, when Ramses II stationed that area as his main city, it was called Pi Ramses, right? And remember, the Exodus didn't happen during the period of Ramses II, right? And they're even weaning away from that in a consensus, because it's either now it's not Ramses because there's too many anachronisms that we find in the text and other stuff, and or oh, they never exited out at all. They were just Canaanites that evolved into Israelites. You know what I'm saying? So you have here the Exodus dates and theories. Exodus is a cultural memory, Egyptian bondage and the Song of the Sea. The Song of the Sea is extremely important because when you're looking at the text for the most consistent aspects of the Tanakh, they are the songs, like Deborah's song that we find in Judges, like Miriam's song that we find the Song of the Sea, like Moses when he does his song. These are internally consistent and have the least amount of variance, which means it was always believed to be true, and you didn't need to touch it, reconstruct it, or redact it. Then you also have not just the song, but the blessings, like Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 26. We see elements of that in the Silver Scroll finding, right? And the Silver Scrolls find two scrolls, and I have, I'll show it to y'all in my pocket. They found one of these Silver Scrolls that date back to approximately or circa 600 BCE that has elements of it that is comparable to what we find in Numbers chapter 6, verses 24 to 26, which goes to show that the transmission of this priestly blessing is consistent over time. That's another thing you check. You check for transmission consistency, okay? And transmission consistency is if the Dead Sea Scrolls say this, and then we find 1,000 years later, the Masoretic text says the same exact thing in the same exact order. And if you want to look at somebody that does, that type of research, look up Emmanuel Tove and go into his works. He does the best work, according to me, in regards to the textual criticism of the Old Testament or the Tanakh. And if we see that the transmission is that where it was written here and 1,000 years later by different scribes in a different region during a different period of time has the exact same wording, we can tell, we can trust that degree of transmission, that prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls construction of that text, the transmission going back further is equally as consistent. So that's why when finds such as the Silver Scrolls are uncovered and we compare it to the priestly benediction and we see the consistency, we can trust the transmission of the text from oral to written and from written to further on written. But this here goes into radiocarbon dating. This goes into the Thera theories, which is extremely important, right? Because if you go and you look at the Thera eruption that occurred in the Aegean Sea, you use the different ice cores to help to date back certain things. And they use this also to kind of align to see when the Exodus occurred. That's really good stuff there. Which way out of Egypt, inspired by a tsunami, and that deals with earth sciences, the sound of the Exodus, World Billion, Museum of Future, and it goes on and on and on. The Egyptian or origin of the Ark of the Covenant out of Egypt, the Israel's Exodus include tales. So everybody should get this book, read it, understand it, look at it objectively, because if you're rooted in your culture, there's nothing that's out there that will deter you away from where your feet are planted at. You just have to be diligent to know that you have a position that you're flat-footed on, and that you can even stand in that position, look objectively at data that's presented to you, and use your position to either agree, rebut, or refute it. So this is why I want to pull this out, because I know he's going to have some information from here because he has this book.
Right. Okay. Excellent. I want to really quick answer a question I saw that Jeremiah Judah put in the chat, and it's a good question because I think a lot of Israelites really. This is an area of study where a lot of Israelites are not really it's not spoken about a lot, and a lot of Israelites are not learned in it. A lot of Israelites don't know what textual criticism is. Textual criticism is not to criticize the Bible, brothers and sisters. The Bible that we have today comes from, depending on the translation of the Bible that you're using, they come from different manuscripts. Like the KJV, the New Testament comes from one set of manuscripts known as the Textus Receptus. Whereas you have other translations of the Bible that come from other translations of the New Testament, like Codex Sinaiticus, Codex Vaticanus, etc., etc. So depending on the translation of the Bible you're using, the source material is drawn from different ancient manuscripts. So what you do is when you do biblical textual criticism, you're comparing the manuscripts to each other to see which one is more accurate. That's what biblical textual criticism is. That's all it is. That's all he's saying. If you want to elaborate real quick on that, Devon, before we move on.
Well, if you look at it, and I watch a lot of debates between Christian scholars and agnostic and atheist scholars in regards to the consistency, the internal consistency of the New Testament, given all the manuscripts that we have. We have over 5,000 manuscripts of the New Testament. And looking at variants, what you'll see is that most variants between different readings are very minimal. Most of them are misspellings. Most of them are words that may be rearranged that still follows the rules of syntax. That is really not something that is a big deal. It's very marginal. And only a small percentage actually affect the real reading of it. Like you also have doublets as well, where you have a scribe write one line and maybe step away and come back and forgot that he wrote that line and repeats the same line and keeps going. You see all these features show up in the text, and we know how to identify them, and we know what caused it, right? So in regards to looking at textual criticism, it's helping you to understand the various variants that are out there and see which ones have the greatest weight, so that way we can do better translations if there is some controversy with the way something is translated and what we currently have today. So it just helps you to become more robust in your understanding of the actual text itself, that the actual translations that we use come from, right? And you can also look at the translations today and learning the language and looking at the manuscripts, you can see whether or not we have good translations today or if it can be translated better. And in some cases it can. Most cases it's fine, but there's certain cases that it can be. And it's not because, somebody, like, people use this term corruption. And when they say stuff like that, they can't prove it. Like textually, when you go into the realm of textual or higher criticism and you use a term like corruption, you have to first define that term and then show an example of it. I've yet to see anybody in this conscious community or whatever that says that the Bible's been corrupted to truly walk me through it academically and show me the methodology on how you came to the conclusion that this is corrupted according to how it's defined in the realm of higher criticism. They can't do it, right? So I'm not here doing textual criticisms. I'm like, oh, I'm gonna prove the Bible wrong. No, I'm being objective to say, look, dude, what we have today, is it consistent? And if it's consistent, can we trust it? And if we trust it, what's the transmission rate? And if the transmission rate is good, like, you look at these different factors, because people will come at you with this. Somebody's going to say something that you have not looked at with the express purpose of deterring you away from what you stand on. And if you don't understand it objectively, where you can argue from their position against yourself, then chances are, if your ears are itching enough and they're scratching it, you're gonna wean away.
All right. So what I want to do now, if I could, Devon, I want to get to the last thing that you and I spoke about that we're going to speak about, and then with whatever time that you have left, whatever that is, I'm going to put the link in the chat. If anybody wants to come in, we ain't even going to call you. I'm going to let you come in. But I'm telling you, if you're coming here like a nigger, no exceptions. If you come in here like a nigger, I'm kicking you right back out. All right? Not here to disrespect Devon or myself. All right? So I'm going to let y'all in a minute. So Devon, let's go ahead and talk about. Go ahead.
Yeah, one second. I'm sorry, Slakia. So what I wanted to do was I was showing this key ring that I have. So one person in the chat, where's he at? Let me get him. Where's he at? Jane Mixon says, I don't know about that one, DP. There's debate on whether the Silver Scrolls alluded to the priestly blessing. Now, I want to ask Jane Mixon, if he want, he can jump in the panel. Do you realize that there's 2 scrolls that they discovered? One of them is in alignment with, and we're going to look at the characters and the syntax in regards to the Paleo Hebrew that's on here, and we're going to look at classical or biblical Hebrew, where we actually have Numbers chapter 6, 24 to 26. I'm not worried about what scholars are saying. I'm using the same tools and understanding to make an determination, excuse me, of what it is I'm looking at, and I'll show it to you on the screen if we have time to go there, or you could just jump in the chat, not the chat, the panel, if Priest Daniel opens up and we can have a discussion on it. But I keep this with me because when they found the Silver Scrolls, it was 2 small scrolls. As you can see, some of it was broken off. But when you're able to do reconstruction of a text, there's certain protocols that you apply so you can healthily reconstruct it. They were able to see that this one that you're seeing here aligns with Numbers chapter 6, verses 23 to 27. And then there's another portion of it, which is something totally different. So I don't know if he's talking about this one that I'm showing him or the smaller scroll. I'm not sure, but if he wants to have that discussion, I'm very familiar with that. He can come in at a later time after you go through your stuff, Priest Daniel Allah, and we can build on that.
Yeah. So Jay Mixon, I got one more question, right? And afterwards, I'm going to put the link in the chat. You could jump in, or I could inbox you private and give you the link so you could jump on in the conversation right now. The brother's willing to talk to you, but I'm not looking at the chat yet, so don't put it in there yet. Real quick, Devon, let's just run down March the 22nd, these 2 debates that's going on. Okay. Let's do debate number 1. We got our brother Captain Tazariak going up against Vince Bantu. All right. I forget what the title of the debate is, but pretty much is Christianity good for our people?
I'll bring it up on the screen. I got it.
Yeah.
A second, let me pull it up.
All right, and while Devon is bringing it up on the screen, all right, we have almost 200 people in the house. If y'all brothers and sisters can definitely please hit that like button. That'll bring more people in. That's the way the algorithm works. Also, yeah, D-Red, man, you got to come up on in there too, man. You got to come on. I know you're really not a camera guy, man, but you got to come up on in there, King. Shout out to everybody that's watching on Facebook too. Shout out to, I'm not sure how many people over there, but shout out to y'all that's watching over in the Maccabees TV group. Go ahead, Devon.
Yeah, I'm going to show it real quick. So let me pull it up. I'm going to share it on my screen. And here we go. Share. I got to open it up. There we go. Hold on. All right. Here it is. All right. There it is on the screen.
Okay. There it is. All right. So, there you brothers and sisters have it right there. Hopefully y'all can see that, right? So let's talk about debate number 1. What are your thoughts on debate number 1 as far as the topic is concerned? What is your, and I say debate number 1 because I actually spoke to Tazariak yesterday, and him and Vince Bantu are debating first. That's the first debate of the evening. Do you plan on coming up for that, by the way, or not?
Yeah, I have plans to be in New York during that time. I can't make a guarantee, but I'm gonna do make it, my best efforts to be there. Okay.
So what do you think about that debate as far as that topic is concerned? Do you feel like that's a good topic?
The one that Captain Tazariak and Dr. Vince Bantu, yes. I don't think it's a good topic because the way it's worded. And the way it's worded, I think is going to hurt Tazariak's position a little bit because it gives Dr. Vince Bantu more of an advantage. And I'll explain what I mean by that, right? there's two questions there. The first one and the second one. Now, here's the first one. It says, is Christianity good for our people? Now, if I look at the history of the Black church in America, and we're talking about during slavery, and we're talking about post-slavery, right, antebellum South and post-bellum South, and look at the Black church and its contributions to the Black community. And even today, there are massive churches that actually have programs and do positive stuff for Black people, right, in regards to the material aspect of it, right? He can use that to say, hey, look, Christianity in America, you know, they have this program and that program, and they've been doing this and that for the Black people over the years and so forth. He can use that to show that that's good. And he can ask people in the audience, hey, have any of y'all ever been helped out by a church, or any of y'all ever went to go get assistance to get, and I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. And I'm not going to put too much personal information out there, but a family member of mine had a situation where they had lost their job and they were kicked out on the street because they couldn't pay their rent. And they went to go apply for rental assistance. And guess who gave them the assistance? Like, what organization? Because what they do is that they try to give you a one-shot deal where they help you pay your rent for 1 month. They give you some time, right? And they put it in a pool, and one organization will select you and give you a donation. And it was from a Catholic church. So a Catholic church gave him money for rent. You know what I'm saying? Like, nobody he knew at that time couldn't give it to him. I know I couldn't give it to him at that time. It was a long time ago, but the Catholic church did, and they came through. So he could use that as the argument to say, hey, look, there's good that they do all the time. But and that's why you have to make it more specific. And I would say Christianity as an orthodox religion based on its history, has history shown from its inception until today, has history shown that it has been consistently good for our people. Has history shown that Christianity has been consistently good for our community? And I think that would be much better, because the moment you show inconsistency, you want to debate. So I don't know what angle Vince Bantu is going to use in regards, is Christianity good for our people? Because that's really generic. But I think it should have been more specific, depending upon who created this. I don't know who created the debate question, but I think that may give the edge to Dr. Vince Bantu. But Azaric is going to probably show it from the slave master's perspective, right? He can show the missionaries coming into West Africa and picking up people from West Africa and bringing them over here to Americas and say, well, was that good? Some Christians will be like, well, no, their means wasn't good, but the end was, and they got the gospel. You know what I'm saying? But you can show all the atrocities that once the missionaries got there, they opened the door for colonialists to come in and take over. And this happened all over. You know what I'm saying? This happened in East India with the Indians out there. This happened in the Oriental, right? Far Orient or Far East with the Chinese. This happened in Africa. This happened in regions of the Middle East. Everywhere that the missionaries went to bring this gospel, in South America, Central America, North America, destruction followed behind it. So I would look for the consistency and say, has it been consistently good historically for our people? And I think that would be way better. And or Tazara can argue from that perspective. And if he argues from that perspective, he's going to destroy Dr. Vince Bantu, because there's no footing he has to stand on that, right? And what Vince Bantu does is that he does a form of escapism. So if he sees that they're extremists that have done things that are wrong, he's going to automatically come and say, well, that's not the gospel, what they did. They're not real Christians. That's what he does. You find a way to isolate yourself from a situation that is detrimental to your position, so that way the audience can ignore that and only look to see what you have. And sometimes I have to take the brunt of some things that are done in my community, even though I don't agree with it. I can try my best to give an explanation as to why it occurred, right? So I don't simply try to be fully unbiased and distance myself just because I don't agree with it, but I try to give an answer for it so people have some insight despite whether I agree with it or not. And I think that's what he's going to be doing. I think he's going to be running away and saying, well, that's not the gospel. And then he uses Coptic Christian terms. and Ethiopic Christian terms. And when he does this, what he's doing is he's isolating himself from Western Christianity. And when he does that, he doesn't have to answer for those crimes. He'll say, no, you know, if you look at the gospel here in Egypt and in Ethiopia, this is the gospel as they had it revealed to them. He keeps alluding, and not just alluding, directly referencing Christianity in Ethiopia and Christianity in Egypt. And that, I guess, in his mind, exonerates him from defending Western Christianity and its atrocities. You should never let him get away from that. Do not let him get away from that. And I'll say this, and this will help Captain Desario. If you study Cotton Mather, do you know who Cotton Mather is, Priest Daniela?
I do not.
Okay. I encourage everybody to go back and study Cotton Mather. Cotton Mather and his son were Calvinists, and they were the ones that wrote. I mean, I wish I had some time I could show it, but if y'all want the source, just email me, kingdomharbinger@gmail.com, and I'll send it to you, Priest Daniela, and you can look at it. But they were Calvinists that justify slavery. Watch this, Calvinists. So you have to ask Vince Bantu, hey, what is your disposition, your theological disposition? What do you identify as? Are you a Calvinist? Are you a Baptist? Are you a Methodist? Are you non-denominational? Do you subscribe to only the Eastern Orthodox Church? You have to get him to assert his position, because what I've done with Calvinists is say, oh, well, you know, this because Christians did this, and that, missionaries did that, that has nothing to do with Christianity. I said, yes, it does, because the Calvinist position that's outlined by Tulip, it shows that what you see that happens is already predestined. That means the fact that Black people experience slavery is a divine thing that was predestined because white people are superior. This is how you got to try to angle them and quarter them off and have them deal with that. So I would have to tell Tazaria, get him to affirm. Once y'all do your back and your you go, he go, you go, and you'll have your one-on-one, get him to affirm what is his theological position in regards to Christianity. Is it systematic, which means can we see it written somewhere as a type of systematic theology that has been laid out by somebody that came before you? And if you subscribe to it, if the essence of that particular disposition in itself teaches something that can justify an atrocity, just like we see the Roman Catholic Church decided to give what's that papal bull that they put out? It escapes me. Where they give the right to certain colonists who were Catholic to go and conquer natives in Africa and in the Americas if they're not Christians, because they're savages. So they're allowed to go and convert them to the gospel, to Christianity, because what they're engaging in is detrimental to their own health and their own progression as a people, right? And you can, it escapes you right now. Somebody's probably going to drop it in there, and it's on the tip of my tongue. But what I'm saying is, when you see that inherent in that particular form of Christianity, where Christendom, the fact that Christianity has to be everywhere. It has to be the predominant religion, because anything outside of Christianity is detrimental to humanity. That is a central core concept, that everybody is laden in sin and that everybody is in a degenerative state. And if you don't have Christianity, there's no way that you can get salvation. So that means you are automatically saying that anybody outside of Christianity is damned and doomed, and they're going straight to hell.
Is it divine? Was the bull Dum Diversus? Is that it? Somebody just put that in the chat. I'm not sure.
Put in the chat.
Somebody put the Inter Cartera.
Yeah, correct. The doctrine of discovery. So the way I would handle this is try to get him to affirm certain things first. And then I will show the inconsistency that Christianity has over history, and show that wherever it went, it subjugated the peoples, the local peoples, to give up their form of culture in exchange for a religion. And what happens over time is that those people tend to lose everything. That is not something that is good. And just because the Black church has done some good, you know why? Because it was the only way for us to cope with the after effects of slavery. It was the only institution that was established that can help to cope with the after effects of slavery. So its institution wasn't because people coming over here and say, hey, you know what? I'm a Christian coming here and I'm going to start a Christian church. No, they found that the only way to help to liberate our community is to imitate what the slave master is already doing.
Right. All right. So we got one more.
Or continue in that stead. But I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Now we got one more. Then we're gonna let y'all come in because I know y'all dying to come in. Y'all asking, can you call? Can you come in the chat? We about to. Can you come into the live stream? I'm about to bring some of y'all in a hot minute. We got one more. Before I get to that last one, Divine, are you prepared to make a call for this debate, or you want to remain neutral? Are you prepared to call a winner?
I'm going to remain neutral for that one, and I just want to make two quick points. The second question for Tazariak and Vince Bantu is Christianity the white man's religion. I don't like that one either, because if Vince Bantu, and this is something that he debated Jabari about, the moment he shows that Christianity, quote unquote, started from peoples that did not look like what we call white people today, then you can't say that it was white people's religion, because if we look historically, the Germanic tribes that took over, hordes that took over Europe, they had indigenous culture before Rome introduced Christianity to them. Because the Roman Empire was fighting these hordes in Europe for a long period of time, and it wasn't to the conversion of Christianity that they were actually able to go and convert these peoples to that religion. So if somebody can show that, hey, white people had a religion before Christianity, you have to say, no, Christianity, or white people, quote unquote, however you want to define that, they took Christianity from the natives, maybe the Hellenistic church fathers and other groups that were coming in that took it, because a lot of them wouldn't even be, some of them wouldn't be considered white. Some of the first ones, some of them wouldn't be considered white. But you'll see that there was a empire that decided to take that religion and use it to conquer nations, because it's the form of old Rome living through the vestiges, its vestiges living through a modern form of the Roman Empire, which is the Roman Catholic Church. So I think in here, if he's going to say the white man's religion, define white man and how they took Christianity as their own to conquer the nations for imperialistic purposes, for colonizing purposes. And I think if Tazariak shows that, he'll be good. Now, the last one was Christianity stolen from Kemet. I think the edge is going to go to Garfield, simply because Jabari's probably going to use some pseudo sources. And and my thing is, that's been debunked. And the consensus is not that Christianity was stolen from Kemet. Like, nobody in academia talks like that. Like, nobody said that. That's an inference that you make based on scattered pieces of data that you try to interlock and say, oh, this is what it's saying, but the consensus doesn't agree with that. So I think Garfield may win on that because his position is correct, but I think Jabari is going to own the audience. So
absolutely,
yeah, it's going to be kind of weird. But for the Tazariak Vince Bantu, I don't know, because I don't know what Tazariak's angle is going to be. Like, I think he's smart enough to kind of like do something unique this time around. So I got to say, I'm going to stay neutral on that one.
Okay. All right, brothers and sisters. So here we go. We're going to allow you, brothers and sisters. I'm trying to figure out, what do I want to do? Do I want to give them the phone number? Because then if I give them the phone number and I bring somebody in, I'm not going to be able to pick up the phone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put the link in here for the live stream to come in, right? I'm going to bring some of you brothers and sisters in. Anybody that wants to come in, you can click the link and you can come on in. Now, Divine, I'm not sure how much longer you got. So
I got 30 minutes.
Divine has about 30 minutes, brothers and sisters. I'm going to put the link in here. Come in, ask your question, and then leave. And he's going to answer you. All right? Do not stay. Do not try to make this into a long debate. Come in, ask your question, and then I'm going to put you out and you can listen to him online. All right? So there's the link right there. That is the link to come in. That is the link to come in. If anybody wants to come in and talk to Divine, if nobody actually comes into the live stream, then I'll put the phone number in there and some of you guys can actually call in. All right. Thank you to all the moderators that's telling everybody to hit the like button. The likes are actually looking good for once. I appreciate it. My moderators are going real hard. Shout out to everybody that's in the room. Shout out to everybody that's watching on Facebook as well. Shout out to y'all as well. I can't really see y'all over there or your comments.
I'm just gonna put this up on the screen until somebody
All right.
jumps in, just so that they can see it.
Here we go. Here we go. Guess who came in first? Jeremiah Judah.
Oh boy, here we go.
How about Shimmy Hawashai Barakatah?
How about Shimmy Al-Shah Barakatah? Jeremiah Judah, the people's chair, the building. Jeremiah Judah, 7,000.
What's up, Divine, man? I've been trying to track you down,
do me a favor. Can you keep the flyer up for a little bit while I engage with them?
Sure.
Okay, my bad. Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, the floor is yours, bro.
What, you don't want them to see my face? What's going on, huh?
Your face is there.
Oh, okay. All right. Hey, Divine, my question is, because one of your students that always brag about you, speak highly upon you, Kyle, I would say student or peer. Me and him have talks, here and there. He said that Israelites are actually basically pissed off Canaanites that just separated from the power structure. Would you agree with that?
I would say that they're not Canaanites in the sense where people would attribute to like regular Canaanites in that region, right? That's the consensus in certain fields, but that consensus has also been challenged as well. Okay. And what I would do is I could pull up the Bible on Earth and I could show you where it's even in there, where he talks about the peasant revolt model, even though Israel Finkelstein didn't create that model. He had predecessors that came up with that idea, where he actually still says that there were still Asiatics that migrated from Egypt into that region, right? That influenced the people to do that. You know what I'm saying? And that's how they got that social memory of coming from Egypt. So I don't fully agree with that at all. I believe that when they exited out, they lived amongst the Canaanites for so long that they became distinguishable. Especially if you read the book of Judges, you see that they started to practice the same things that the Canaanites were practicing. The scripture says every man did what was right in his own eyes, right? And then over time, when we look at the situation where the Bronze Age ended, the Iron Age started to emerge, and these people started to go towards the Central Hill countryside and do mostly pastoralism in the South, and in the North horticulture and other forms of agriculture. Then opportunistically, they began to expand once they were encroached by the peoples on the coastal plains, which was the Philistines. And we see that in 1 Samuel chapter 7 and 1 Samuel chapter 8. And then from that point, to rebut against them, because the Philistines were federated, and the federation goes back to them being in the Aegean Sea region before coming onto the coastal plains. They decided that they wanted to be equally as federated amongst themselves, and be this entity with a king over them, so that they can push back against the sea peoples that are encroaching upon their territory, right? And this is when they start to rise up against the local vassals that are there and have these different battles in that region, right? So that's when we see them fighting the Canaanites, etc. So that's my position on that. And also, I'll say this real quick, I don't teach that 3 million Israelites came out of Egypt. Like, that's not my position. I did a lecture on this, and I went into Exodus chapter 12 and to see how many Israelites actually exited out. And my number is 90,000 and under, anywhere from 60 to 90,000 exited out, and not the 3 million. And I gave my explanation why. And the reason why I say that is because the archaeology agrees with that as well. Looking at the migration area, because 3 million people can't be sustained in the route that they took and to go into Egypt. The Transjordan region didn't even have 3 million people there from any kind of excavations that we've done, but it does support up to 90 to 100,000 people, because Amenhotep II, in his second Asiatic campaign, he went into Canaan and he took, according to his records, 100,000 captives back to Egypt to replenish a workforce that was lost, right? So that helps to account for the number that Israelites had already exited out, and that there was this grave gap that they needed to fill in regards to their various building projects, governmental building projects to replace. So when you go with the 3 million narrative, then it makes it difficult for you to support the fact that these people came out and went into Canaan and they ravaged everybody, and these, quick, escalated battles that happened here, and here. And then over time, they subjugated those peoples. That's not how I present it. I look at the biblical data and in light of the archaeological data, and then from that, I formulate my postulation of what occurred, right? And that's what I've done in several videos. If you go back to my YouTube channel, I have a playlist that's called The Exodus Proven by Divine Prospect. Check it out. And I talk about these things in detail. So that's my position on that.
All right, because you know that's going to be one of Garfield's points in his book, because he's always saying that we Canaanites.
Yeah.
So that's going to be something that you can kind of weigh in and see what angle he coming from.
Mm-hmm.
Let me ask you something about your textual criticism. Because you said you're going back to pre-exilic. You want us to go back to pre-exilic culture and how they worship. How they their worship, or are you just?
So the Israelites, and we're deriving this from biblical data that is supported by archaeological data, right? Okay. So in biblical data, you see a law in the book of Shemot or Exodus that says that if a man is working for you, like if you are an employer and you have an employee that's working for you in the field and he's unable to meet his quota, you're allowed to take his cloak, but you cannot keep it when the evening comes, because what will he have to cover himself, right? Okay. And you have to give it back. So we see this particular instruction in Torah. Now that's cultural, right? Well, if we go back to the Yavne Yam Astrakhan, we see a case where an employee is appealing to a governor because an employer took his cloak and did not return it according to the laws of the land at that time. And the only place that we see that exactly is in Torah. So that goes to validate that Torah was kept in the land, right? We have something in the archaeological record that validates what those codes of conduct was. But also there were other customs that they've done alongside just keeping what some people will call the 613 statute laws and commandments. And one of those things that I teach about is like libations. Right. Libations was something that was done by Jacob, where we see the first libation done in the scripture, where he pours a libation over a stone that he had dedicated based on his experience with Yah, right? And then we see libation done by David and his men, water libation. We said libation done by Samuel when he's dealing with the people, and he's telling the people, look, you got to cleanse yourselves away from these idols and you got to worship Yah if you want to fight these battles. So then you see them do a water libation themselves. That was something that was part of culture. It was libation, something that they were never told don't do because it was part of their culture.
Well, I didn't mean to cut your wisdom, but we even before I found out, came into the truth, we was doing that anyway, right? Pour a little liquor for your homie.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, people would say that, and people would say that's an Africanism because it's also in West Africa, and they'll say, well, West Africans been doing that as well. But what I try to show is that that's also Israelite culture. So people who are afraid of that or see that as some kind of spooky thing that you pour in libations, I'm like, well, that's in the Bible.
Right.
Right. And our ancestors were doing it in the scriptures. So it should be, and I think that's the problem, that some people will hear pre-exilic and they think that's so bad. Well, the Israelites were in the land during that time, and that they were good and bad being done before and after. You know what I'm saying? They were sieged. And what I'm simply trying to do is just go back to see how they actually apply these things. And I'll give you one last example. Okay. If you don't study pre-exilic Israelite culture and sister cultures, you'll get certain things wrong. Like, for example, people will look at me and say, well, Divine, you trim your beard, Divine. Oh, Divine, you over here and you shaping up your beard. And they'll be like, yo, that's wrong and blah, blah. And they'll say that to me, right? So when we go to Leviticus chapter 19, verse 27, I'm going to bring this up real quick because I want to show you when we say pre-exilic what I'm talking about and how studying that can help you better practice the statute, laws, and commandments, right? So I'm going to pull it up real quick and I'm going to read it. So Leviticus chapter 19, verse 27. All right, let's go right here. And this is something that a lot of us are familiar with, right? If we go to, I'm going to do the King James and the ESV. The King James says, ye shall not round the corners of your heads, and neither shalt thou mar the corners of your beard. And remember, the beard is anything from the edge of the skin all the way out to whatever protrudes from the beard, right? And that's supposed to be the corner of your head where the beard is grown. ESV says you should not round off the hair on your temples or mar the edges of your beard. In Hebrew, it's lo takipu peat rosekhem velo tashit et peat ze kaneka. So the key thing we want to look at here is this word here for beard. We have ka, which is the suffix for your, or second person masculine singular. And that word could mean the chin area, the beard, or the cheeks. So it doesn't always just mean your beard per se, right? And then that word there for disfigure is shokath, and that means to ruin something or corrupt something.
Put the marks on you, maybe?
Huh?
Put marks on your face, how they cut into your face?
Just like, you know, a lot of black people, their skin naturally keloid when you cut it, right? So that way beard cannot grow, where you're marring your face or ruining or corrupting your face so that your beard cannot grow. Now, the key thing that I want people to keep in mind is that when the Most High told the Israelites to go in the land, he told them, do not do what the Canaanites are doing in the land. Everything he told them to do is in opposition what he told them the Canaanites were already doing in the land. So if we were looking at Leviticus 19:27, and brothers got all different types of interpretations, what's the best way to determine how to translate this, how to best understand it? Well, you would have to look into Canaanite culture and try to find some record from the Canaanite peoples themselves about some practice they were doing that goes in contradiction to what this is right here. And then we have it. If you go into the Ugaritic tablets and you look at the Baal cycle, there's a scene in which Baal is killed by Mut. And in Hebrew, Mut means death, but he's also the personification of death, and he's a deity in their mythos. And he fights Baal for his throne. He kills Baal. And when El finds out about it, El is mourning for Baal. Now, Israelite, according to Israelite culture, has a form of mourning, right? We see Job do it, we see the prophets do it, etc. But a lot of times you'll find the customs of the people come in the form of mythos. And they use the mythos to explain why they do a particular practice.
Hey, family, but in the morning, don't they shave? And there's some scriptures where they shave, right?
They shave their heads.
Shave their head.
Correct. They shave their heads. The beard is different. Okay. Do they shave the beard? Now, if you have a scripture that says they shave the beard, send it to me. But mostly you shave your head.
Shave your head. Okay. Yeah.
You put ashes on your head. Your beard is not touched. But what happens in this case is that when El mourns after Baal's death, now mind you, this is written by Ugaritic priests who are native to the region, but they are being subjected to the Amorites that took over that area. And Baal is one of their deities. Yam and Mut was one of the local deities for the people, but they have to showcase that Baal is supreme because he represents the Amorite peoples. So what El does is that when he sees and finds out that Baal is dead, he takes a flint knife, and this is something that they would use out of stone, and they would use this for circumcision, right? The Israelites use this for circumcision, and he would use that to shave his beard off till his face was bare, and then he would take that flint knife and he will cut or mar the sides of his face around his chin all the way to the other side, so that the face is marred so the beard could no longer grow back. This is shown in the Baal cycle of the Ugaritic tablets. So now when you see this Canaanite practice, then you understand how to juxtapose or contrast it to what Yah is telling the Israelites not to do. Do not shave off your beard so that your face is bared with the intent of marring it so it does not do that, because this is what the Canaanites has done. So when we go back to pre-Israelite culture, you look at all the other sister cultures to see, well, what were the Canaanites doing, so we can better understand what the Israelites were told not to do. Here's a reference point. So this is what I'm using to help to reconstruct culture. So when we find certain difficulties that some brothers may be arguing against, we can actually make sense out of it. So hopefully that helps to answer your question.
Right. I ain't trying to hog up the show in your time, man, but I got to hit you with one more question.
Sure.
Because see, I'm 48 years old, so I'm losing the top of my head. So am I supposed to let my head puff out on the side like George Jefferson? I mean, that's hard for me, brother. I mean, come on, man, help me out.
You said your hair?
Yeah, I mean, can I shave it? Because they be telling me I'm in violation for shaving my.
You shouldn't bald your head, right?
Well, I can just go with the clippers, though, right? Lowest again.
Yeah, so on the sides of your head, I mean, you can let your hair grow. There's nothing that says that you cannot keep it neat, right?
No, it ain't going at the top no more. Is what I'm saying. So I mean, I got the George Jefferson.
If it's natural, that's fine, right? You just
Right.
can't do it. But if it happens naturally because of male pattern baldness or
Right.
some other kind of, testosterone loss, then it is
Right.
what it is, right? But you're told not to bald your head. You're not to do it because the only time you do that is to show a sign of mourning.
Or purification, right?
Huh?
Or purification. They did it when they
Correct. Like, for example, when the Israelites
so would that be my loophole if I said I'm gonna purify myself every morning? I'm trying to find, man. I can't go around with the puffs on the side.
Hey, that's between you and the Most High. I'm gonna give you an example.
Oh, right. Because
Like,
the brothers with the long hair was getting them. I said, well, you ain't supposed to have your hair long like a woman, so we both gonna be in trouble.
And let's say that you want to take a Nazirite vow, then you may be justified if you can keep it to the T possible.
Right.
But even remember, we're in Acts chapter 21, where James is talking to Paul, and he's telling him to go and do the customs that's in our tradition with the other dudes, so you can, let the Yahudim know that you're not breaking the law. He goes and he does this thing, right? But when the Israelites would go into a city, there was always rules of engagement, and then there was rules of war. And one of the rules of war is spoils or booty. And you see this very particular instances where Yah will give a prescription on what needs to be done, because these are either the rules of engagement. Like, for example, if there was a city the Israelites came across and that wasn't the people that Yah told you to extinguish, you're supposed to entreat with them a peace treaty first and say, look, we don't want no beef with you, right? We just need to pass through or go here or do this. Can you do that with us? And if they get hostile and they start getting amped, then you can fight them, right? But when they went and they took women of other nations, they had to take those women and they had to shave their heads bald, clip their nails and everything. And they are allowed to go through a period of mourning before they're able to take them as a concubine or as a wife. So shaving your head represented a state of mourning, right? Okay. So this is what happened when you're repenting. This can happen when the nation themselves has fallen into a decline. But if none of that is going on, you are not supposed to bald any part of your head at all. You can cut it down, but if you take a razor and you shave it clean, hey, that's between you and the Most High.
Most High, right.
I'm just
okay. All right, I can't let you get out of here without this, man. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Breeze. One more.
Good.
One more. I
got somebody.
Second Peter. Hold on. 2 Peter 2 and 4, right?
Okay.
So God did not spare even the angels who sinned. He threw them into hell in a gloomy pit of darkness, where they're being held until the day of judgment. You said hell didn't exist.
All right, so you want to deal with that. So this goes into the
I'm done. Yeah, go ahead.
Tartaru is also known as Tartarus. We see that also in certain places where it says hell. Now, the best way to understand this, and everybody has, I guess, their own positions, but the best way to understand this is to understand what influenced these writers, right? Now, if we know that the Book of Enoch was in circulation in Qumran, and the Jordan area and the borderline between what we would say is Israel, Palestine, and Jordan. And we know that baptisms was done in the Jordan River, right? Because that was living water. People were baptized in living water. We see that the apostles and even John the Baptist himself, they had interfaced with those communities in that region. Those communities in that region had preserved what we call the Book of Enoch today. They saw the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilee importance. Now, hold on, let me finish, and I'm gonna explain to you what I mean. They find it of also importance because we also see an allusion to the Book of Enoch in the Book of Jude, right? And then we also see it also an allusion in the Book of Vayikra or Leviticus chapter 16, where that word scapegoat is not there in the Hebrew. The name is there as Azazel, which is representative of a deity because it's a theophoric name. It's not the name of some animal, it's a theophoric name. And these things can be traced back to the Book of Enoch. This reference here can also be traced back to the Book of Enoch, because when you see that it said that ascribe all sin to Azazel, and the archangels are sent to Enoch to cast judgment against these watchers that had fallen and polluted themselves with women, one of the things that happened to Azazel and the rest of them, but mostly Azazel, and I'm saying this for a reason, is that he was chained up and he was cast into what we call a pit, you say a bottomless pit or some kind of pit of darkness, and then rocks was cast to cover him up. And it was believed that this happened to the east of where Jerusalem is at. When you go to Leviticus chapter 16, and they're telling you about one goat that's used for the people for sacrifice. The other goat is sent into the wilderness. That goat is sent into the region that they believe that this entity has been buried. So when you see this and this right here, this is not talking about us. This is not talking about me and you being cast there. And in this instance, it's saying, right? If you go back and read 2 Peter chapter 4, it says, for if Elohim spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them to hell and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world. And he goes in to talk about Sodom and Gomorrah and etc. He doesn't say anything about this being for us. He doesn't say this is for us. And the reason why Peter is not going to say that is because he's using a reference to something that's already in a social memory of the people, which is the allusion to the book of Enoch, where these deities were cast into a pit of darkness, which was then attributed to the word Tartarus, which comes from a Greek word, because if you look up Tartarus in Greek mythos, it has a similar meaning where entities are cast, chained, and held there. So they borrowed this word because Hellenized Jews would know what it is, and he attributed their understanding of their cultural memory of Enoch and say, hey, this Tartaru that you know about, yeah, who's actually casted there are these ones that have came down and, you know, from their state and polluted the earth. So that way a flood had to take place. Because if you see the next scripture talks about the flood, talks about the old world. So first it tells you about some entities that had sinned, that are cast into Tartarus, that is an everlasting change of darkness, reserved to judgment. And then it follows up with the flood, because this is the reference to things that they would know from the book of Enoch. So
you don't subscribe to the book of Enoch.
Huh?
You don't subscribe to the book of Enoch?
I subscribe that there's portions of the book of Enoch that are authentic, that can be validated, and there's some that were a later addition.
And well, not 2 and 3. I'm talking about Enoch. What first Enoch?
So first Enoch, I believe that a good part of it is part of Israelite culture that was preserved, right? We have the Slavonic version or translation, the Ethiopic translation.
Yeah, 11 was found in Aramaic, and 3 with the Dead Sea Scroll. 11 was found in Aramaic, and 3 in Hebrew.
Correct.
But I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna read the scripture. I'm gonna get out because this is for Old Testament only people.
Okay.
It said, First Enoch 1 through 5, and there I saw one who had a head of days, and his head was white like wool, and with him another being whose countenance had the appearance of a man, and his face was full of graciousness, like one of the holy angels. And I asked the angels who went with me and showed me all the hidden things concerning that Son of Man, who he was, and whence he was, and why he went with the head of days. And he answered and said unto me, this is the Son of Man, who has righteousness, with whom dwelleth righteousness, and who revealeth all the treasures of that which is hidden, because the Lord of spirits has chosen him, and whose lot has preeminence before the Lord of spirits in uprightness forever. This Son of Man whom has seen shall rise up the kings and the mighty from their seats, and the strong from their thrones, and shall loosen the reins of the strong and break the teeth of the sinners. And he shall put down the kings and their thrones and kingdoms, because they do not extol and praise him, nor humbly acknowledge whence the kingdom bestowed upon them. Basically what I'm saying, the book of Enoch was written 300 years before Christ even came around. It was written down in written form. You see what I'm saying? But a lot of these Old Testament onlys, they don't want to acknowledge this, because the people that was against Christ back then, they rejected this, because the book of Enoch is the most Christ-centric book that was out. It has more prophecies about Christ in the Old Testament and New put together. And a lot of the scriptures that come out of Enoch is actually you'll see kind of like in the New Testament. See what I'm saying? And if what I'm saying is, don't let the Bible has been canonized more than over 17 times. You know what I'm saying? So don't let no man tell you you can't read these books. You have discernment and you read them for yourself. And that's between you and the Most High to figure out what's right or wrong. With that being said, People's Champ gonna sign out. Shalom, barakatah.
All right, Jeremiah. Peace.
All right, we can let somebody else in real quick.
All right, so now I got 2 people in there. I ain't gonna take nobody else. Papa Tay has been waiting for a long time. I'm not sure if he's still there. Papa Tay, if you're there, unmute the mic. The floor is yours, Papa T.
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you clear. We can hear you clear.
Yes. I have I want to say like a three-part question. And it's in regards to the do y'all believe that there is a possible override like Robert Eisenman, like Professor Eisenman, like what he believed that there is a possible overwrite of the New Testament? And also, what do you think about the passages in the New Testament that misquotes the Old Testament? And also the contradictions in the New Testament that are not reconcilable. And the last question is about
wait. Papa T, I'm sorry, because you asked it a lot and we're gonna skip something. So why don't we do it one at a time? All right, just we'll go through them quick. All right. So number one,
okay.
When you say overwrite, I'm not sure if Devon knows what you mean. I don't know what that kind of means when you say overwrite. Devon, you know what he means by that?
I just need him to define it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, because Robert Eisenman's position is that and well, I'll just say it. So basically what he believes is that the way the New Testament is written to kind of like hide Jesus' family and like James and the rest of the family. So it, was calling brothers, cousins, and but I wanted to see if y'all were familiar with that position, but if y'all not familiar with Robert Eisenman's position, then I will move on with another question. So, but with the New Testament, with the way the New Testament misquotes the Old Testament, it's kind of hard to see actual Hebrew scribe that is producing the New Testament in the Greek language, misquoting Old Testament scriptures. And then also you have the situation where you have,
One at a time, though. Is this the same question or is it another one? Let's do one at a time.
No, it's the same question. It's the same question.
Okay, go ahead.
And so you have situations where you have Jesus being born on 10 years apart in two different gospels. And then you have another situation where basically when you line up, I can't remember that guy's name, but anyway, but he speaks about it. Like when you line up the four gospels and you read them, there's a lot of like inconsistencies. You see what I'm saying? So I just wanted to know your position on that. Like, what do you guys think about that? Because to me, and also, it's just, but anyway, I just want to see what y'all position on that, because in my mind, and from other information, it seems like even with Josephus, even with the book of Josephus, there are certain parts from the book of Josephus that is used, but they're getting the dates wrong. And so to me, it seems like me personally, it seems to me like Gentiles are looking at a particular document that they don't really understand, and they're adding stuff. And also because they had the book of Josephus and they had the Old Testament, it seems like there was a lot of key Hebrew concepts that they did not understand.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah,
I'm gonna let you finish off the question, but I don't want you to be too long with the questions, especially if you have multiple, because I have one more person I got to bring in. So, kind of make your questions a little more concise. But I kind of understand.
That's it. I
really want Devon to answer because he's the guest of honor. But I'm going to say a couple of things. Number one, I'm going to speak to the last thing you said about concerning Josephus. If you look at the dates that we have on record for some of the books of the New Testament, some of the books of the New Testament, according to when the scholars say they were dated, are before Josephus. I don't know if you know that. So you have to be very careful to say that certain portions, you have to be more specific to tell me which portions of the New Testament was written that was taken from the Josephus, because we have to look at when Josephus was. We know that Josephus was around during the time of Vespasian and Titus, right? That's the time that he was around. And you have portions of the New Testament that actually are written earlier than that. So we have to be very careful with that. Now, also,
my view is that that's the what do they call it, the Q document, I believe it's a particular document that is the source. But
anyway,
it seems like no, I understand what you're saying, Daniela. No, I'm just saying. So like it's not impossible.
Talking.
Yeah.
Right. I want to be able to jump in and answer your question, but I want to say one more thing about what you said. I'm also really careful. And again, I'm not the guest of honor. So when, if you want to have this discussion again, you can come back another time because I really want Divine to answer it. But I'm really careful when people say the New Testament misquotes the Old Testament, because many times what you see is you'll see paraphrasing. We do it every day. You see somebody like paraphrasing something from the Old Testament where the wording may not be exactly the same. Like one of the ones that we all know is this says, what was it? Matthew 1:21, it says, "Thou Bethlehem of Judah, are not the least amongst the princes. Out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people." When you go and you read it in the Old Testament, it's not an exact quote, but the point is it's making reference to something that's in the Old Testament. So it's like a paraphrase, for lack of a better word. We do that all the time, but I'm not the guest of honor. I want Divine to go ahead and speak to the question. So give him a chance and then you can come back in. Go ahead, Divine.
Nah, you good. That's excellent. Well, what I first want to say is that those points have been argued ad infinitum, right? In the realm of textual criticism, as far as internal consistency amongst the Gospels, they have been addressed by various Christian scholars. If you are familiar with any of the consensus from Christian scholars on how they show the consistency amongst the Gospels themselves in regards to the narrative, where they show that it's a chronology thing that people kind of take out of context, and they also show the different angles in which things are said. And I think the main problem that most people fall subject to, not me per se, is that they have to subscribe that everything that they have right now in their translation is correct. And when you look up different things that is coming out, like the coherence-based genealogical method, are you familiar with that?
No, sir.
Okay. So there are different methods that are used to try to show that a lot of the variants that are there do not affect the overall narrative, and that there are different angles you can take to harmonize the Gospels. This has been written about for at least 60, 70, almost 100 years now. I have about 7 books where it's a collection of essays which this is discussed, and the different methodologies used to harmonize those things. But a lot of times when people make those statements, they're good inquiries, but they're just not familiar with the negative side of saying. Now, you're holding the affirmative side by saying that there's internal inconsistencies amongst the Gospels. So therefore, it's not trustworthy, right? But are you also researching the negative position to your affirmative that says, no, there is consistency and this is how? So if you're not familiar with that, there are books called New Approach to Textual Criticism. There's books that talk about the coherence based genealogical model, the harmonized gospel, which is another text. And there's several other books that are written on this subject matter that shows you the harmony between the Gospels. It deals with the chronology in regards to the birth of Yeshua, where some say it's 4 BC, some say it's after 0 AD, because they're looking at the consensus and using that to date when Yeshua was born, etc. So this stuff has already been addressed before. So all I will do for you, Cole, anybody interested, just email me at kingdomharmony@gmail.com. I have tons of books on different essays that were written that addresses these things, and even books that are just written on these things, and I will send them to you. You made another statement about how the New Testament misquotes the Old Testament. I'm gonna address that last one for you. And then about Robert Eisenman, I'm familiar with Robert Eisenman, right? I'm familiar with his work, especially his work on the Dead Sea Scrolls that he's done, right? So I'll have that discussion probably another time because it takes some time to unpack that. But what I will say is that for the misquoting, you'd have to show me where something's misquoted. Give me a scripture and let me go through it real quick with you to show you that it's not really a misquote. So what would you call a misquote? Because, a misquote by definition means that you are quoting something that is not even a quote, that doesn't exist anywhere. So what has been misquoted? Give me a verse. Passage.
Oh man, I wish I could, because I'm not really that quick like everybody else. I post certain stuff on my Facebook page. I don't want to go through all that for the sake of the audience, right? But
so real quick, Papa Tay, right? Divine, you usually go live like every Friday, every Shabbat on your channel, right?
Yep.
So Divon's channel is Kingdom Harbinger Ministries. So when you get that information, when you go to your Facebook and you find it, you can feel free to hit him up when he's live on his channel and ask the question, and the brother will definitely answer. This is not your last opportunity to ask the question. All right. And there's his email.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
And you can email me too, kingdomharbinger@gmail.com. But like I said, if you had a passage, then we can deal with it, and I can show you that there's no misquoting. There may be some.
Well, there's no.
Go ahead.
Well, off of my head, I could think about, like, you know, the passage about the virgin birth. That's one. There was a passage.
Wait.
In,
let's do it. Let's do it at a time. So you're saying the virgin birth, because you know we don't subscribe to the virgin birth, right? But the virgin birth, you're saying a misquote. That means if I look at what's quoted in the New Testament, it should not line up with what we're reading in the Old Testament. That's a misquote. So like if I say that Trump says death to all Africans, quote unquote, and nobody can source that anywhere, that's a misquote. So when you say there's a misquote, you're using the wrong term to define what you're trying to say. I think what you're trying to say is that it's a misapplied prophecy. That it was, if you look where that's referenced from in the book of Isaiah, chapter 7, that deals with what Christians call a virgin birth. The word that's used there is not the word that's used for a virgin, right? That would be ula, right? It's a different word altogether. So somebody would says, well, you see right there, when we get into the New Testament, it doesn't use neither one of those words. The word it uses there is similar to Bethula, which is parthenos. Right. And that would mean a birth without the insemination of male seed. Right. And then somebody said, well, that's a misapplied quote because you're applying it to something where previously it was already done and completed. So for a Christian to take that, or whoever was the scribe was to take that and apply it as a prophecy to Yeshua in regards to a virgin birth, that's misapplied because that verse is not talking about a virgin woman. I think that's what you mean to say, correct?
Right. So, well, because I'm not really that smart or whatever per se.
So you're making some good inquiries, but I just think that, and here's a suggestion to you, because you know I'm not knocking what you're doing. Keep doing that. If you can find these things, put them on the table and let us deal with them, right? Because if these look like consistency problems, then it's better that we know about it and we're giving a rebuttal or refutation than somebody outside of our community doing it with the purpose of tearing us down and showing the ignorance that is in our community. So what I'm simply saying is, because I study this stuff, I know how to utilize certain terminology to apply to certain things. And I'm just saying that to equip you, because your argument still stands, because we still have to deal with that. But when you present it, certain terms is used is I know it's because people may hear it, like they may see a post somebody did it or a meme or something like that, or read it somewhere or watch some random video. But in the realm of academia, they don't use those terms for that, right? So like I think he was going to get another scripture, but misquoting is simply saying that somebody quoted something and that quote cannot be recorded anywhere. So if they're misquoting the Old Testament, that means we should not be able to find that anywhere in the Old Testament. And you got to remember this, because the New Testament is written in Greek, you have Aramaisms in there, right? But the best way to compare it is to also look at the Septuagint that's written in the Greek that we have from the codices from the 4th century. And when you're able to do that, then you have something that's more comparable than directly relating the New Testament Greek to biblical Aramaic or biblical Hebrew. So sometimes you may see certain words that may not align. That's because it's the way it was translated in Greek prior to it making its way in what we call the New Testament. And remember, during that time period, one of the colloquial languages was Aramaic in 1st century CE Palestine. So a lot of things that people will be talking would be Aramaic. Now you have what's called the Targum. The Targum exists because of paraphrasing from something that happened historically. When the Israelites were sieged by the Babylonians and taken to Babylonian captivity for 70 years, what happened was that generation that went in, they started to die off, and Imperial Aramaic was started to develop that we find its way also during the Persians, the Babylonians. That started to become the most dominant language. And if you was a father and you're old and you have children in captivity, in order for them to survive, they're going to need to know what language is being spoken in order to do trade, business, or whatever. So you have from 70 years, at least 2 generations going into a 3rd generation, that when they come back to rebuild the temple, the city, and the walls, they find a book and everybody don't understand what it means because they're speaking Aramaic, which is a sister language to Hebrew. So there were some parts of the Hebrew that is not mutually intelligible that they cannot translate and understand. So it says that the ones who did understand gave the meaning to everybody else. And this is where the Targums develop, where you start to have paraphrasing of the Hebrew liturgical text for those who spoke Aramaic. And now when we get to the 1st century CE Palestine and people are speaking Aramaic, now we have to look at things that are written in the Targums that may line up better if we translate it to Greek than if we go back to the Hebrew Masoretic text. It all has to do with where you're sourcing the information from and how do you properly handle it. So misquoting, I wouldn't say is true. Misapplied, you can use that term.
Okay, now real quick,
Yeah.
Papa, I'm gonna have to go because I got one more person on. I know Devon has to go, and I got to get up very, very early, like 3 a.m.
Okay,
early.
cool.
3 a.m. early. You want to call in anytime. And also, like I said, Devon is live every Friday on Kingdom Harbinger Ministries, so you can definitely go there and y'all can continue that discussion because, like you said, it's a great discussion, brother. Most High bless you. All right, King?
Yes, sir. Thank you. All right.
Peace.
Shalom.
All right. Kayal.
Yes, sir.
Kayal, you in the building? So
yeah, I'm here. You hear me?
Go for it.
All right, cool. Hey, first I want to say this is a great show, great bill, fellas. I appreciate it. This is Kyle from Atlanta. What's up, Divine?
What's up, my brother?
My brother, cool, man. Chill out. I ain't gonna beat you up too much today. I'll be good.
What's up?
I just got a question, man, because like when we first met, it was on some RBG Unity type of stuff, right? Nice. And I see the way that the Hebrew African community is splitting, and it's splitting bad, and it's getting worse and worse by the day. So, like, I just have a question, so we can maybe build upon this. Like, who are the people who are in West Africa now that don't subscribe to being Hebrew Israelites?
Mm-hmm. So, we have to look at, and I'll unpack it for you a little bit. We have to look at the different theories that have been rebutted in regards to what colonialists had brought into that region and what started to develop as far as oral traditions amongst the locals that lived there, that some rejected and some accepted, right? So you have what's called the Oriental hypothesis. And Oriental hypothesis in layman's terms simply means that people from the Orient or from the East, they migrated west into West Africa, and there were nobody there, and they populated that region, and they became the people that are there today, right? I don't subscribe to that. Then you have what's called the Hamitic hypothesis, which shows that there were sons of Ham who were likened to Caucasians that made their way into West Africa and saw savage people living in the bush, running around or whatever, and they civilized them and brought high culture there, right? I don't subscribe to that either. So in according to my theory, as far as West Africa had already a populace of people living there. And we have subsequent migrations that was making their way in and out of West Africa. An example of a migration exiting, a portion of it exiting out of West Africa is the Bantu speaking peoples, right? Because we know that Igbo is part of the Kwa language. And we know we're looking at the Bantu migrations through linguistic data, because they do genetic relationships between the languages and deduce it back to a common origin. And some people believe it was by the Niger-Benue confluence region or Lokoja, and made their way from west all the way to Central and South Africa. We see, looking at that data and information, that peoples were already there in that region. So if we go into archaeology, and Sukkah and other areas were excavated, and they discovered finds there as well, as far as bronze working that was done in that region that comes from the 9th century AD. But then when they do further research into it and look into the Stone Age, we found tools in there going back to the Stone Age period, right? So we know that that area has always been occupied. But then you have people that are migrating from various regions into this region, especially when the Silk Road was established and other means of trade where foreigners coming in there. We had Jews that came from Spain and Portugal and from other regions that were making their way into Africa and doing various types of trade. And when trade happens, people migrate in and out of regions. So we see Through the Bantu migration, people are expanding out of West Africa, but then we see also migrations into West Africa. A good example of that is the Dogon tribe. In the area of Mali and those cliffs areas, the Dogon peoples were a later group of peoples that came there than the people that already were living in those regions, right? And these Dogon peoples came from the east, and they came and they migrated in that region. When I say east, I'm talking about still within the continental plate of Africa. And they then took over and they settled in that region from about the 13th, 14th century onward. But there were other subsequent settlements in that area before they even got there. So the people that are there in West Africa are amalgamation of various groups that are local indigenous and peoples that have migrated into that region. Now, to unpack that further, I would need a little bit more time, but we can definitely, build on that, I guess, offline or somewhere else. But because I don't subscribe to the Oriental hypothesis, which says that, there was nobody in West Africa and they were populated from people by the East, I disagree with that. And that people from the East who are Hamitic, who are more relational to Caucasian people who we identify as Caucasian today, that went and brought high culture to the local savages that are there, I disagree with that. I believe that most people that migrated there from the East were still a low-based people because there were empires that already existed there, and there was already high culture that was established, and that they were a secondary class citizen that was living in that regions amongst those people, even doing trade. We see that with Aski Muhammad, where Aski Muhammad says that he doesn't want any trade between the Berbers and the Jews, and if the Jews are found doing trade with the Berbers and vice versa, that he's going to enact, some kind of extradition, getting them out of there, or they're going to be persecuted, right?
So you believe in like a shift in the E1B1A and E1B1B, like a counterclockwise shift that happened sometime during the Bantu expansion and the sub-Saharan slave trade? Is that what you're saying? Like the people who was in West Africa, they rotated and moved to East Africa, and the East Africa, they came around as traders to West Africa.
Correct. So I'm gonna give you an example of what I mean. If we're looking at, let's say we look at DNA, right? And let's say we look at E-M2, right? And E-M2 is what?
That's a branch of E1B1A.
Okay. So if we look at E1B1A, what would you say you are?
I'm E1B1A 7A.
Okay. So let's take off the subclad suffix of your 7A. Let's do your E1B1A, right? So we was looking for E-M2 or E1B1A, and we found somebody that was, let's say, Ramses III, because Ramses III is E1B1A as well, right? You don't share the same exact markers as him, but you have some parent markers that he shares, right? Would you say that Ramses III, that his successors populated West Africa? Would you say that?
No.
Okay, so you would believe that it was through the expansions of people in the West that possibly have transferred their genetic.
It says that Ramses came from the South. It said he came from the South and migrated north.
So look at this. So if he came from the South, well, not Ramses himself, you mean his ancestors.
Yeah.
Okay. So if he migrated from the South, then the source of your E1B1A comes from where? The West or the South?
E1B1A comes from the West. E1B1B comes from the East.
We're not talking about B now. We're talking about Ramses III now having E1B1A. I'm saying this is somebody that's found that has this haplogroup, and we know that his ancestors came from the South. I'm asking you, where would he have gotten his distribution of that DNA?
He would have gotten it from West Africa originally when they migrated. From
West Africa, you saying, right?
Yeah.
So
it wouldn't have to be West Africa. It would have to be central to
after the Bantu expansion, correct?
Yeah, it had to be after the Bantu expansion.
Okay. So what I'm simply saying is, if he's found there, Ramses III is found there having E1B1A, and you have E1B1A, are you saying that he's one of your direct ancestors? Is he? Or he's just somebody from a ethnic group that shares the same genetic ties as you?
He's from an ethnic group that shares genetic ties with me.
There you go. So looking at that, when you are looking at the frequency of DNA in West Africa, we see E1B1A, correct?
Mm-hmm.
But aside from that, they found other DNA haplogroups in that region as well. Just like if we go and we look into, let's say, Israel today, there are some smaller frequencies of E1B1 successors that are there from the people that lived during the Holocene period and prior to about 14,000 BCE, but it's a different type What was that?
Yeah, now you got to deal with the is it the Ori El Ruji? It's 18,000 years ago in West Africa, and the body has the E1B1A haplogroup, and it's genetically proven that they had the same haplogroup as people in the area.
What area you talking about? I didn't hear you. Say that one more time.
This is in, you can look up Bingerville, Binger, Vile, Nigeria. For the locals, it's called Erie or Ilo Iluri, ELERU. I mean RU, excuse me. So that'll be how you would spell it out if you want to type it in. But they have bones 18,000 years ago in West Africa that shares our same genetic markers as West Africa. But they didn't necessarily.
You mean you, right? You talking about us over here?
Yeah.
So I mean, there's no argument there, right? What I'm saying is that there were other groups that migrated there, and if you look at any sample base of DNA, you will see there's other frequencies that are there in these regions based on migrations. This is what I was trying to say. The higher frequency would be your E1B1A, E-M2, which is the newer nomenclature. But I'm saying there's other frequencies that are found as well that has other different haplogroups. That's just happens to be the dominant one in that region.
Yeah, I think we're off the subject a little bit. I was really asking, who are they in the biblical narrative? But I appreciate the biblical.
So let me answer that. That's excellent because I've discussed this before. So in the biblical narrative, the Bible does not talk about people from West Africa. So you have to use a different methodological approach to discern who these peoples are. And the reason why that's important is because that method is what was used to colonize those people. Because there are not any successes that's mentioned in the scriptures, right, in the Bible that the white colonizer had used. So simply they're outside the scope of being a civilized individual. This is where you start to have the doctrine where the Negro of the beast comes out, where they're some kind of hominid that was created when God created Adam and Eve, and that this hominid being a beast of the field was under the dominance of Adam and Eve that then gave birth to Japheth, Ham, and Shem, which were the dominant peoples that had high culture. So anybody outside of that, they were given the right to dominate. They were given the right to colonize. So this is why you have to look into that carefully when people say, oh, these people in West Africa are Hamites. And I'm saying, well, what group, what tribe did they come from according to the scriptures? Because Ham had X amount of children. So which ones did the Bemlikle people come from? Which ones did the Mendike peoples come from? Which ones did the I don't know, Yoruba or Igbo or Ibibios? Any group, if you look at who did they come from? Which one? So when you're unable to answer that, you have to say, listen, the text was written in this particular type of context. Keep it within its context. Once it realms outside of its context, use other methods to determine other things. You don't have to force this narrative on everything. And I think that becomes the issue with our communities when we do that. And then when you ask somebody a question, well, if they're a Hamite, well, which son of Ham did they come from? They can't answer it. And that simply shows that they're just taking something that they learned from the text and presupposing it onto everything else that they see. And I think when that happens, you have some oversight on some details like what we're saying right now that you simply can't account for. So hopefully that gives some kind of summation on what you're asking me about, my brother.
No, that's what I appreciate you answering the question. I appreciate you taking the time. Thank you, Daniela, for allowing me on your platform. Y'all have a great day. Black Power too.
Daniela, you there? Hi, are you still there? Am I by myself? Hello? Family, hit 1 if you can still hear me. I don't even know if we're still talking. Hit 1 if you can still hear me. Hit 1 if you can hear me. I don't know if they're there. If it's just me, that's fine. I could keep going. All right, well, I'll keep going till Daniela comes back and ends the show. So shout out to the family that's watching. I will be in Orlando. We're doing a KHM Orlando chapter launch February 21st. We're going to be near the Universal Studios area. If you want to come and if you're interested in what we're doing as an organization, or you want to do a meet and greet or whatever, email me at kingdomharbinger@gmail.com. It's funny because one of my mods is in the chat. Chris, can you drop my email there? But it's also on the flyer, or you can call or text me at 939-2280. If you're in the city of Orlando or the surrounding areas, email or call me because we got about 5 slots left that you can RSVP for, so we can invite you out to this exclusive event out in Orlando, Florida. All right. So, you know, shout out to Maccabees TV. Make sure you're subscribed. If you haven't already, subscribe to Maccabees TV. If you're watching this, next to the subscribe button is a bell. Hit the bell button for all notifications. So every time Priest Iyanla goes live, you get the drop. All right. Hit that thumbs up. We almost at 200 thumbs up, and make sure you'll share this video everywhere. Put this back.
Yo, Divine, I appreciate you, Lord. You did a great job. The people loved it. So you know what that means. You got to come back soon, man. It can't be 5 years before I get another interview. And I'm more than willing to come on your platform, but I'm waiting for the invite. I ain't going to invite myself. You heard?
Cool. I got you.
Most I'll be with you, Lord. And thanks for coming on again, man.
All right. Shalom, my brother. I appreciate it.
Shalom, King. All right. There you have it, family. Hope everybody enjoyed it. I appreciate everybody here. Definitely going to try to, you know, have guests on more often. But your brother Priest, I gotta go, y'all. I gotta go, y'all. I gotta get up very, very early in the morning. All right, so I'm about to be out of here. Make sure y'all share the video. Make sure if you're not subscribed to Maccabees TV, that you subscribe to Maccabees TV. All right. With that being said, brothers and sisters, it's your brother Priest, Daily Outlaws of Israel, Maccabees Alliance Council, and I say shalom.
Something soulful to make your soul full. Let's go. I kind of like this right here. Yeah. Got me feeling some type of way. I told y'all, it was musicians that brought me into the truth. Got me up here dancing in the booth. They say the truth shall set you free, give you liberty, strictly. With your lies, you must be kidding me. The end is almost here. Of this captivity, it's time to repent. They say the truth shall set you free, give you liberty, strictly. With your lies, you must be kidding me. The end is almost here. Of this captivity, it's time to repent. Now watch this. The blessings, the curses, the lesson, the purpose. When we break God's laws, it's aggression, dispersion. The kingdom, the promise, the greatness, the honors. I want to live to see the day when Satan's demolished now.